Looks like we're live. They said you're live. What's going on, everybody? Hope everybody's having a good weekend. Give everybody a chance to trickle in here while we share the love, share the page. Just give me a minute. You know the drill. So I got the comments up good. So you can see them on the page. Let me go through the groups here. There's that notification. Man, YouTube's pretty good about those. They never do pop up for Facebook. I don't know why. So if y'all want to get notifications, join the militia and Fieldbillies group, both of those on YouTube, and you'll get them pretty quickly. I think that one was from Fieldbillies, but they both should send you a notification pretty quickly. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. You gotta watch them. But if you want like that notification as a reminder, because if you like me, you forget every fucking thing you've ever learned or know, and yeah, it gets to be frustrating as hell. Not feeling real good today. I had a stomach ache all afternoon, so I don't know. A lot of people in my family have trouble with glutens, so maybe that's something. I've got IBS, but this feels different. Feels a little bit different. I haven't been feeling good lately though. Getting old, and it sucks. Sure does. Trying to catch some of these Black Friday deals and pre-Christmas sales deals and all that. I saw where Bever had their grinder for $200. It was a 3,000 watt one, which is pretty good. Commercial mill grinder, and it was wet and dry grain. So that's a big plus when you look at a grinder to buy. Having one that'll do wet and dry grains is pretty cool. But $209, not bad. I mean, I got mine, but I think mine was like 2,700 watt or 2,800 watts. So it's a little fewer wattage, a couple few hundred watts difference. So I'm not sure how much, drastic difference that'll make. I don't think it'll be a huge difference, but and finally the Facebook, yeah, those notifications coming in from other groups that I'm posting to. So getting a little bit of boom, boom, boom. That's from Frank right there. So hopefully Frank got moved in. Let's see if we're in here. It looks like old Marky Mark's on live. Him and Lisa doing their. I forgot they did their spice thing on Tuesday, man. When I took the Tuesday slot, when they got rid of the Wednesday slot for me, so I may have to talk to them. Maybe I might start at 9 or something. Work out something. That's a good podcast. I like them both real well. I don't want to. I don't want people to have to decide this or that. I like for everybody just to be able to watch one good podcast, and I don't like doing it at the same time other people have something going. So maybe we'll have to talk and do something different. Maybe we'll just do Saturday for a while, at least till after Christmas. That's, oh yeah, let's stop that. Usually I get a few more in than that. That's odd. But I did want to look at the calendar here real quick. Yeah, let's see. Next Tuesday will be the 16th, and then the 20th we're going to talk about wine. And then the next Tuesday, the 23rd, we may not do that, and may wait and do the Saturday because it's like 2 days before Christmas. And it's, I don't want to. It's time for family, and I may be traveling a little bit to do the Santa thing, so I'm not sure what's going on that week yet. So I'm gonna have to leave the 23rd. It'll be kind of tentative. Um, after that, well, let's see. When's New Year's? Okay, New Year's Eve will be Wednesday. Okay, cool. All right, let's see what's going on, Clint. What's up, brother? Super busy at work tonight. That's all right. That's good. It's good to be busy. Yeah, having being able to do the wet gradings, that's also good. What's going on, Jim? Good to see you from Ohio. Got a lot of brothers in Ohio. A lot of distillers up there. A lot of shiners up there going on in Ohio. A few friends up there. Awesome place. Ohio, Tennessee, both sides of me pretty hopping, man. I like them both. So what's everybody got going on? My apple, I still need to run my apple. I got to try to find time to do everything. I've been trying to get all this Christmas shopping done, and pretty much got most of it done. I missed out on lost about $20 on a deal. I had this video card for my computer. I'm gonna put in there, and they had a hell of a deal, and that's all they had it at Walmart. So I got Ann to see if I should get her discount. Buy it at Walmart, and they sent her home with the wrong one. And by the time she got that taken back and exchanged, they were out. What's going on, Jake? Yeah, there's a few shiners out there in Kansas for sure, brother, for sure. Met a few down there in Arkansas, as a matter of fact. Came to Arkansas Festival. But we also have some brothers out there in Kansas in the militia for sure. Got about every state. I don't know about Hawaii. I think we got Hawaii covered too. I know we got Alaska. Most of the 50 states. We definitely got the West Coast covered and the East Coast pretty much. I don't. There might be some New England states we don't have members in, possibly, but pretty much most we got most of the U.S. covered. I'm not sure about Hawaii. I have to check. But I guarantee you, in the DIY Shine and Steel Building group, we've got pretty much all the states covered. We got quite a few members in there. We're growing, man. We're almost 27,000 in there, and I'm pretty sure we got most of the states and quite a few countries covered. A lot of people. It's awesome. We're growing, man. So if you got questions, and you're not able to hit the show, and also we've got the ability to do nicknames. So if you want to be, inconspicuous and kind of discreet and not be known, you can use nicknames in there. And it's a new feature that Facebook added. We added it to the page so people can be somewhat more anonymous. I mean, the admins know, but other than the admins, other members won't know who you are. So you can kind of do an alias kind of thing, and that's cool. That way you can get in there and ask you questions and not have to worry about it. Because I know a lot of people, we get a lot of people watching the show that lurk, and they don't really want to chime in. Sometimes they will, if you tweak them with a question that they have. or something, or if they wanted clarification on something. But a lot of times they'll just listen, and that's awesome. I did that for a long time too, just kind of listen in and see what everybody was talking about, and kind of learn just from the conversations, because a lot of people have the same questions. It's pretty much, that's why it bothers me. A lot of these groups, people that were in the groups and now have learned quite a bit, right? And so they're learning, and they're got quite a bit of knowledge, from asking the same questions. And somebody come in there and ask a beginner question. They go, "That's the stupidest question I ever heard." It's the same question you asked just a few years ago, asshole. Answer or shut up. It's like, man, they just gotta browbeat everybody down and flex on them. I got that knowledge, my forte, and all this. And it's like, I don't like that. I hate that, man, when that happens. I also don't like it when they say, well, Google it. Well, they came to the page to ask a question so they could ask individuals and not get some Reddit answer or some bullshit answer from some unknown. And they feel more comfortable asking it more in a private group than, just searching it on Google and trying to learn it on their own. It's tough. There's sometimes, especially when dealing with safety and what ifs and how, and if you're doing this and you don't have some kind of fear that something might happen, you might catch fire or get sick, then you should, because there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and that's why we're here. We want to make it safe and enjoyable, and so everybody can and have a good experience with the hobby. What's going on, Skyrider? 150 gallons of watermelon moonshine. Little watermelon crawl going on. How did it turn out, man? My wine, my watermelon wine was not good. It wasn't. I've never done watermelon before, and they had this competition this year with watermelon. So yeah, sure. And I tried 3 different kinds of watermelon. I was kind of doing a little experiment to see, the difference in the I guess the round ones that are the green variegated, and then the long full size ones, seedless, the small ones were, and then the seeded ones, the big long variegated ones, and then the small round ones that were real dark green and seedless. And the real dark green ones made probably definitely the best wine out of all of them. And when I say best, I shouldn't use that adjective for that. It was not as bad as the other ones. That's what I should say. And I really wasn't that pleased with it. I don't know if it was temperatures, because it was during the heat of the summer, so maybe the temps got up a little bit too much, and created some off flavors, right? We talk about that. So I mean, it happens to everybody, right? You can't. There's sometimes things you get beyond your control. I have chillers that I can cool it off when I'm doing a fermentation and it's warm. And I'm definitely not going to break out the air conditioner and try to cool it off or pack it with ice or something crazy, So kind of just got to go with it, with what you got. And none of them turned out really well. I will say that the dark green one was the least offensive, and it wasn't real bad. It wasn't something I would drink as a wine, but it was just, yeah, it was not good. And so when I distilled them, it didn't improve. They didn't get any better, and I was real disappointed in it. But I took it anyway and turned it in. I'm not going to back out of a competition and everything just because I didn't have the result I wanted. And the entry fee went for a charity, so I wanted to go ahead and enter and pay the money, the $20 to the charity, and make sure that went to a good cause. And I wasn't going to be a bitch and say, no, I didn't do good, I'm not going to enter. Hell, I chased a lot of jars there, and a lot of them taste just as bad as mine did, but not something that I would really want to do again. It's just didn't turn out quite well. Maybe in a cooler, maybe if I do it in the basement or something, it would be a little better. But yeah, it didn't turn out well. Yeah, we do. Yeah, you got to remember, we all started sometime, and got to learn sometime. That's why we want people to come here and learn and ask your questions. Anybody can Google it, but you get kind of a dry answer, and it's hard to you don't get to talk, right? You don't get to converse and you don't get the full answer, and you get a lot of different answers, right? And the same as in a lot of the groups, I've noticed that you ask a kind of a factual question and you'll get lots of different answers. And really, when you're asking something factual, you should get pretty much one factual answer, right? And I don't mean stuff like what yeast is best for this or that. That's totally opinionated. And there's so many ways, it's not a process either. There's so many processes that you can do that'll arrive at the same drip, right? You can get that same drip and have a decent drink, and you can go about it many, many different ways, right? Like steeping versus cooking, like using red angel or yellow label angel yeast versus, gelatinizing and using, amylase. There's lots of different methodologies, different yeast, different things you can do that'll arrive at the same, 12, 10, 12, 14% mash that you'll distill, and each have a similar result based on a lot of different factors. So, there's no facts when it comes to things like that, but there's certain scientific facts. And you ask these factual questions and you get a lot of different answers. It's kind of crazy, man. But yeah, my watermelon craw didn't do too well. I hope yours does better, Skyrider. Was it real flavorful and sweet? Mine let mine go a little too dry. It got to where it's bitter and dry, Uh, but it didn't improve when I distilled it either. I mean, it's not the worst, but it's probably the worst I've made, and quite other than not scorching, it's probably the worst I've ever made that I didn't scorch. Just wasn't really a big fan of it. I may uh, try to do it inside in the basement and a little cooler temperatures, and maybe try different yeast and see if that improves things a little bit. But it'll be on a small scale. I had quite a few. I thought it was going to be something great, and I bought a bunch of watermelons. I had like 20 some watermelons, and they wasn't cheap. So yeah, propane. Yeah, yeah. Now when he says he's running 150, I didn't think he was talking about all at once. Now it might be a couple of runs or hell all at once. That's a damn good 150 gallon. Yeah, that's a biggie. That's a biggie. Miss Lisa. I guess y'all done with your podcast. I forgot. Y'all do every Tuesday. I couldn't remember. I thought it was Monday. So you did the herb thing, and they kicked me out of Wednesday to make room for Roger and them and Jeremy because they did theirs on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So I had to pick a Wednesday or Saturday. So I went ahead and took Tuesday and Saturday. But I was thinking you all did Mondays, and then I don't know. I definitely don't want to overlap with you all. Definitely ain't gonna post on Mark's page either until after y'all done. But I can't post right now anyway. I'm running out. Well, hey, I had to leave early. I had to leave early. I couldn't sit there and answer all the questions. That's well, what prize did I win? Did I get a free trip to Disney World or something? Yeah, I like the podcast, so definitely want to support those guys, man. I like the show they got. I just thought it was on Monday. Damn it. What's going on, JJ? What's up, brother? Yeah, it is always nice having Miss Lisa in it. She's pretty good. I don't care what to say about it. Yeah, they got a show talking about herbs and spices and I think canning and all that kind of stuff and pressure cooking and pressure canning and we changed to early Saturday. His work schedule, right, right. Well, I wasn't sure. I saw y'all on Tuesday, and like, well, damn, was it Saturday? And then I don't know. I did know that Saturdays was in his schedule. Yeah, Mark has a really odd schedule. It's pretty much a flex schedule. What's going on, Roy? Doing all right, brother. I'll be honest with you. I had a migraine for like 4 days earlier this week in a row, and then the last couple of days I hadn't had migraines, but I haven't felt well. So hopefully we'll be feeling better this next week coming out of it. But yeah, Mark's schedule, it's a kind of a flex schedule. He'll work, 6 or 8 weeks or something like that, and have to work Saturdays. So he has to change up his podcast to other days, and we can't do Saturdays, and it moves around. It's tough. Yeah, I like watching this show. 3-foot column. I'm assuming that's probably big and to early Saturday. So what? So y'all starting at 6? Let me know. Yeah, send me a message and let me know. I mean, if we need to start a little bit late on Saturdays, we can. Like, I want to be accommodating for y'all, and let me know. And Tuesdays as well. If you're doing Tuesdays, let me know what time, and we may be able to delay a little bit before we start if you need be. What's going on, Larry? The Midnight Rider. Yeah, let's get on the story. Oh, song, I mean. No, let them catch the Midnight Rider. What's going on, Mr. Shadow? I'm sorry. I was trying to find out more about Sky Riders. All at once, 150 gallons. That's a good steel, man. That's a good size steel. What's going on, Uncle Shine? Good to see you, brother. Tell me what I won. I heard I won a trip to Disneyland or World. That's what Lisa said. All expense paid, and I get to stay at your house. 25 gallons of blackberry. Yeah, I like the blackberry wine now. It makes a good shining wine. I've got some in there. Actually, I've got some 15 gallons ferment right now. Be a good wine. What's going on, Richard? Good to see you. You're working about right now, brother. Good to see you home and not working. Y'all staying warm? What's going on, Scott? What's up, brother? So yeah, I got some apple and blackberry going on right now. I've got to get that apple distilled, and got some tails to run too. I got quite a bit of tails to run. Matter of fact, I'm gonna try. I've got some. I got a couple of 15s and a 5-gallon barrel. I think I've got enough brandy to clean up and put. I might do a mixed brandy in a 15-gallon barrel. I don't know. I've got enough to do it, but I was thinking about just cleaning it all up. Not neutral, but just kind of cleaning some of it up, especially like the watermelon. I'm definitely going to put that on the column. What's going on here, Billy? Y'all all get moved in and settled in? All right, brother. Good deal. Distilling tip. Now, there's a lot of contention about that. I think 65 to 75, if you can come off the drip at that temperature, that's a pretty good temp. Any warmer, it tends to get a little hot. Any cooler, you tend to lock some of your oils out. So I think coming off at about 65 to 75 in that range, some will say 60 to 70, but that's fine, but it's in that range. It's not, an exact thing. I don't know. Somebody might say 68.75 or some shit, man. But yeah, 60 to 70, 60 to 75, somewhere in that range is a pretty good temperature to come off. And I think that question came up once when I think they were talking to Amanda and Alan Bishop on a podcast, and Amanda brought up something that I thought was pretty interesting too. Is a lot of people felt that when it came off warmer, that it seemed hotter, that the alcohol seemed hotter, and it's not really hotter. And I always thought that too, but she said that it's because there's more volatiles in when you taste it and drink it. You're kind of smelling that, and it's more aromatic, so you're getting a lot more of that, and it's not really any hotter. It's just that you're getting, the molecules are further apart and they're more active when it's warmer, and it's just a little more volatiles coming off, and you're smelling that and you're tasting it when you drink it. And that makes a lot of sense. So, I've always thought it seemed hotter, when it came off like that, but I think that's a pretty good scientific reason, about how a lot of the volatiles are just more actively, more aromatic, not exactly, evaporating off, I guess you could say. And so it's probably a little bit more, you're smelling it as you're drinking it, and it just seems a little hotter. So that made a lot of sense to me. But you can definitely get it too cold, and you can definitely get it too hot. Of course, when it's too hot, it's not really condensing properly, and you may lose alcohol, vapors. And when it's too cold, sometimes it can, lock up some oils. And I've even heard of some people getting really, really cold and having, flow issues. But that's kind of weird. I can't imagine that many oils in there causing it to become thick and not flow well. I don't know. I guess you can get to that point, but I think good question. I think about 60 to 75 in that range, somewhere in that range would be fine. And I think the coolant going in, if you can keep it about that temperature and keep your condensated about that temperature, whatever it takes. But it's going to vary so much based on your condensers too. Worms versus shotguns versus Liebigs. It's going to be tough. It's of course the bigger worm. With a large reservoir, large flake stand. For a worm, probably going to be easier to regulate something large like that um, than like a Liebig. Awesome. Now, how many grains do y'all do, Skyrider? 67, 73. That's perfect. I don't think that they come off differently. I think that they lock up and they don't mix as well. There's acids and oils that come off together, and I think at certain temperatures the molecules mingle better than when they're cold. Nah, brother, I guess you got to go in and work early. It's funny. But yeah, I think 63, 70, 67, 73 perfect if you can come off. But I think it's just the acids and the oils and the way the molecules are. And if it's really cold, I think um, they're not as active, and they don't combine and esterify as well maybe when it's colder, and they're a lot more prone especially if you have like uh, a alkaline water that you're proofing down with. They saponify easier at room temperature when they're like that. So you know, but you can always kind of heat it back up or put some high proof back on it and get rid of that. But that would be my guess without actually, you know, doing some research. 10 gallons of corn. Yeah, and it gets tougher too in the wintertime, man. As all those fermentations start slowing down. Yeah, yeah, I think so too. And I think that's the reason a lot of people, I used to put liquor in the refrigerator too. It's just easier to drink when it's cold. But I think when it's room temperature and really, you know, when you're drinking a bourbon or something, it's really meant to be drank at room temperature. So the volatility, you know, you get more flavors that way. No, that's a different. That's not. That's Uncle Moonshine. That's not Shadow. Or did Shadow say he's out here too? Oh, no, he just got hit with a frying pan. That's all. How can you maximize rectification on the Weber 18.5 without a reflux column or a condenser? Um, yeah, there's actually a valve at the top and a valve at the bottom of the football. And theoretically, when you're running it, tails tend to gather at the very bottom, and you can drain those out of the bottom of that, right? So you're getting some reflux, and then your tails drop down to condense the bottom. All right, brother, have a good one. Thanks for dropping in, man. Let us know how that watermelon turns out, brother. But yeah, so the top one you can open to let the heads off. Now I don't know how, you know, functional it'll be. You know, it's kind of small, and I don't know. I don't think that you're just going to get all your fours and heads off by just opening that little quarter-inch valve at the top. I think a lot of times the Chinese try to imitate something on a large scale and micro, you know, do it on a small scale. And I'm not sure if on an 18 and a half in that small football with those small valves, if you're going to be able to get true rectification. But theory is that all the volatiles will go up out of the top of that, you know, that valve. Um, and it's, you know, you can put a line on there. Don't just run it off into the air, especially if you're in an enclosed place, right? Running with, you know, propane or something, because we don't want you getting a lot of alcohol vapors uh, in there. But you could run a hose from that down into, you know, something with water in it, and just let it bubble and let it go through that water like a little bong. Let it just blow out through the water and blow that higher volatiles out. And then in the bottom, I guess the bottom valve, if you wanted to, you could go from that into one of the valves on the lid and kind of reflux that back in, or just catch it. You know, you can run a tube from that, run it to something else, and just catch those tails that come off. But theoretically, only, you know, your more of your hearts. It's not really a rectification column per se. It's I don't know. I just don't think it's going to function. I've tried to fool with it a couple times and I couldn't tell any difference, and I just seem to just make the cuts as normal. Um, I think it's more of a novelty at that small of a scale, but maybe if it had a little bit bigger valve or opening that you could get some more volatiles off there. But just that little teeny quarter-inch, I don't know if that's going to be sufficient or not to take off all those, to rectify all those higher volatiles. So I fooled with it once or twice, and I could, you know, but I do drain the tails out of the bottom from time to time. You know, I will put a little cup underneath there and drain those out. But I pretty much, other than that, I haven't fooled with the top valve on it and tried to blow off all the higher. Yeah. But theoretically, that's what they're for. But you know, I don't know. I don't think it's going to work on that small of a scale. But it'd be nice. But I don't. I use the football sometimes, but I've been using column more, not necessarily column, just straight up into a spool of the sight glass with my, you know, with my mesh, and then to my valves, right, where I can strip, and then I go one direction to strip everything, which is just basically a tube straight 2 inch straight in, straight out into a shotgun condenser, and then I've got a valve there, and then I've got a valve off the T over here where I can go over and into an infuser, so I can run, you know, just straight runs and stripping runs on one side, and dump it back in the still, and then run it to the other side to infuse, you know. So I kind of, but when I do just a straight brandy or something, I'm not fooling around and getting all fancy and stuff. I'll use that football head. It works well, packed full of copper. Copper mesh. It works just fine. But I do drain the tails out of the bottom though. So I don't want those kind of, you know, you could reflux those back into the steel if you wanted to and run them, you know, kind of clean them up and get a little bit more alcohol out of it. If you wanted to do that, kind of retort. Yeah, yeah, you do. You need a taller column and space for, you know, for there to be a separation, you know, in temperature, and I just don't think that's large enough, and I don't think that small 1/4 inch is going to be large enough to allow all that higher volatile out. Right, and see what he's talking about is like you imagine well, you've seen we've shown the pictures. Let's see if I got one handy here. A lot of these columns, right? These big tall columns, and they'll have like it'll go up and they'll have a T come off here, and it'll go up on up about 5 or 10 feet, and have a T there, go on up 5 or 10 feet, and have a T there, you know, all the way up. It'll have multiple T's coming off, right, and multiple lines coming off the column. And what that does is it fractionally distills. So each, like your tails are going to be tend to be at the lower part of the column. Your hearts are going to tend to be in the middle part of the column, and your higher volatiles, your, you know, your fours and heads and ethyl acetates and acetones and all those are going to tend to be, you know, methanol and everything is going to be at the top. Your lower boiling point will be at the top, and your hearts will be in the middle, and the, you know, the highest boiling point, tails and oils, fusel oils and stuff will tend to be at the bottom. So that's kind of what they do in fractional distillation. And see if I can find some pictures here. Well, I don't see any pictures right off, but you know what we're talking about. You've seen the big, huge, tall column that trying to see. I know I've got some somewhere. Have a big column. I've got to try to unify all these pictures and get them organized a little better. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I can't find it right off the bat. But it's we were looking at it last week when we were talking about we had the three steels sitting side by side by side, and we were all looking at 3 different columns. Let me find one. I can't stand it. Let's see. Uh, let's see what this is here. This might be a diagram. Oh shit, it's so tiny. It sucks. Come on, man. Yeah, that's way too complicated to follow. So anyway, they're basically, get a better search here. Here, maybe. And they do a lot of continuous stills this way too, but yeah, I'm not getting actual photographs. These are all just freaking diagrams. I want to see pictures. Images. Another massive. Yeah, there we go. Here we go. Here's some. We can all. Well, son of a gun. I click on that picture and it comes up with something that's not even anywhere near what I was looking at. Okay, let's see if I can capture that. All right, let me add that. This is kind of what we were looking at last week too, and it's there's a big old column. That's kind of what. Now reflux is it is reflux. I mean, it's rectification is just the separation. It's the process of the separation. I mean, there is reflux going on, but not all reflux will give you neutral. You can control the reflux, right? So the more reflux, the higher the proof and the less the flavor. But there's a happy medium there. And when you're using a deflegmator, you can kind of achieve that happy medium, right? With right, you don't need reflux, high volume reflux. No, and that's what we were saying there. You can use a deflegmator and kind of separate it that way and compress it that way and create your reflux, or you can use a column. And it doesn't have to be a big huge column. It can be one simple. Let's see here. I did have a picture of that, and it's similar to the one I just got. I've got to definitely organize pictures better. Yeah. So something like this, this is an easy way to get some reflux and clean your spirit up a little bit without cranking out 190 plus proof, right? You can clean on this and still get 160, and you can control it with a deflegmator. So with 6 on top of this column here is a deflegmator, and you can control the amount of reflux and where it loads up on these plates by changing the temperature of the coolant going into the deflegmator. Now, of course, the colder you make it, the more reflux you're going to get, and probably the lower in the column that you're going to balance. And then if you have warm water going into it and you have less reflux, you're going to tend to load higher. So you can adjust that on these plates. But yeah, you don't need high volume. There's ways to at first rectification on that football head is just, it's not what's going to be a reality, you know, in short. It's an interesting novel idea that they did, but you're really not going to get good rectification by opening up that little 1/4 inch valve on the top of a football that's that large. Right? It's just, if it were a little bit larger, and the football were quite a bit taller, you could get a little bit of separation there, but it's just, you know, so small and compact. You would have to run it, like Clint said, pretty slowly to get any kind of separation, because you've got a pretty good vapor velocity coming through there. And I think that the turbulence and everything is going to, you know, kind of prevent a good separation, whereas in a column, you can get a little bit better separation. Yeah, you know, yeah, you can, well, that's, you know, shiners noticed, you know, when they ran their steels out and when it started raining, their proof would go up, right? And it's because that cold rain was hitting that cap and cooling that cap off them, creating reflux, and their proof went up. But to answer this question, rectification is basically the separation. Now, there's some rectification methods that require reflux. It's part of the, you know, it's part of the process. Right. So basically, when you open up that little valve at the top, you're just, it's kind of the same as doing cuts. You can just make cuts and do a little bit better just as a straight pot still distillation, because that's basically what it's, a pot still. It's not a rectification column. And they put those in there as kind of a novel idea. It just doesn't work. But I do like the valve at the bottom catching, because in the bottom of that football, it does catch some of the reflux and some of the, you know, lower volatiles, you know, the oily higher boiling point kind of condense the most, and the least, the lowest boiling point, or the higher volatiles that come off. So there is some, it does catch good tails, you know, and the lower volatiles in that bottom valve, and I let those drain off. But yeah, from time to time I'll just open it up and drain it out. But making good cuts is basically going to do the same thing for you as far as just that goes. That's what they're trying to do, is prevent the fours and steam those off. It's like a lot of people say, I run my steel until it steams a little bit and pretty good, just let all those fours and heads steam off, and then I put the cap on it, and then kind of the same principle. But yeah, it doesn't work that well. How long will shine with fruit in it last on the shelf? Depends on the proof. As long as it's like 80, 90 proof plus, it'll last quite a while. But I've seen some 40 proof and low that, well, actually, I just poured some out just not too long ago that had some fruit and stuff in it that was really low proof, and it was all fungused over. And I was like, nah, yeah, I wouldn't even try to rerun that on a column. You know, that's like, and it was this little jar. I was like, nah, not keeping that. And it was something someone gave me. I don't know, it was probably a year old, sitting in the fridge, and I don't know, it might have been cherries or something. I couldn't even identify the fruit in it anymore. And I couldn't tell by the smell. So yeah, it's in it. It's Drano now. But it'll depend on the proof. As long as your proof is pretty high, it'll last for a long time. But the lower the proof, the lower its property is going to be to keep it fresh and keep the bacteria killed off. Yeah, yeah, that's what we're talking about. You know, rectification in like a taller column. You know, the heat rises. So in a column, your hottest and most volatile and your lowest boiling point uh, things, compounds tend to be at the top of the column when you have a big huge column like that. That's why a lot of these continuous columns function that way. They'll feed into the middle. they'll drop down, and as they heat up, dropping down, hitting that hot vapor coming off the boiler in the bottom, and tails and water drop down and reflux down into the boiler and heat the steam. And as it comes up, it heats the mash that's dripping in, and it all separates in this big tall column. Hottest stuff in the top, kind of the medium temperature in the middle, and the cooler stuff at the bottom as it refluxes down, right? Things cool. And so your hottest, most volatiles will be at the top, getting piped out, and then your hearts will be kind of in the middle, getting piped to another place, and then the heavier, um, higher boiling point oils and stuff and tails will be in the bottom. So that's basically but there's reflux happening, creating the separation, but it's just rectification. But there is reflux involved. So kind of, yeah, yeah, and it is confusing, but there is reflux at the same time. It's getting reflux down, and separated into these different temperature and zones, I guess. It's kind of like water thermoclines, right? And you have different temperatures. The deeper you go, it gets cooler and hotter and warmer as you go up. Kind of like that. It's a thermocline, I guess, inside the column. Right, and you need that height, and that little football and that little teeny valve, it's just not enough to separate shit. I did it at first to try it, and it's just, that's right. Yeah, and the plates help prevent, that blade for velocity from just trying to push everything up, and it breaks it down, and it allows things to separate better. Yeah, and you can adjust that. That's why you put a deflag on the top, and you can, kind of adjust the way your plates are loading, and you really want to kind of do that, and you can do it different ways, depending on how much cleaning you want to do. So if you want more flavor coming through, you're gonna, let a bit warmer water going into your deflag or deflagmator, whatever. So you want a little bit warmer temperature going in there, and that'll keep things loaded more highly in your column, and you'll get lower proof coming off. And if you the cooler that water is, the more condensation you got coming down, the more separation of those volatiles, and it'll get quite a bit hotter. Your proof will go up considerably, and you'll just load the plates differently that way. And it really, there's no right or wrong. It's just what you want out of if you're trying to strip and get all the flavor off and make a vodka, then you definitely want to cool that down and increase the reflux, and decrease the amount of water that's going to be coming off, right? So, but at the same time, that's how you lose that flavor. You got less water coming off, and a lot of that water is what carries a lot of your flavors. It's a lot easier for a lot of these flavonoids and polyphenols and all that to bond to the water than it is the alcohol. So when you get that, less water in there, you're going to get less flavor as a result. Right. And it's kind of like, yeah, you can, it's, yeah, it's like a separation and distillation. I don't know if you could consider each chamber like a little thumper, but kind of is, things bubble and they're redistilling. Yeah. As you load the plates, it's sitting there bubbling, and the reflux is causing the water and the heaviers to drop and the lighters to go on up to the next one, and you continue to do that, and it's you're basically redistilling it all the way up the column, and if you keep it cold and keep your condensation high, you'll eliminate most of the water off of it. It'll drop back down, right? And it helps clean too sulfides. Those plates that are made of copper. They'll help remove sulfides too. But that's kind of a secondary thing. It's not the reason that they use them. It's not to remove sulfides. A lot of people, oh, they use those columns to remove the sulfides. No, it's for loading the plates and increasing your reflux and increasing proof. And depending on caps, larger or smaller for best flavor. Again, it's that's something we were talking about not too long ago as well. A larger cap will create more condensation than a smaller cap, and it will decrease your vapor velocity. Having that having a cap like a coffee can come straight up and like just a cylinder and just like a pipe coming off that will be different than if you have a what's it called, fenestrum that comes up at an angle and has like a let me see if I'm using the right word there. I think frustum. I got finessed. Frustum. So the shape of the cap is like a frustum. It's basically a cone with the top cut off, but it starts small, it works up, kind of like just like a funnel, basically. That's called a frustum. I couldn't think of the finessum. I don't know where in the hell I came up with this shit. I used to be able to know all this stuff. That's a frustum. But that's and having that cone come off, right, instead of a pipe where you've got the cone from large to small, that helps increase your vapor velocity. But having that frustum like that allows for more condensation versus not having it. And the larger it is, the more condensation you're going to have. But that's why they call it a Kentucky whiskey cap. Now, too, whether that arm, the lint arm, whether it goes up, creates a lot more reflux down into it, right? So that increases your proof considerably. Having it go straight out kind of mixes, a little bit of the reflux and maintains flavor okay. And then having it comes down, eliminates the reflux from the lint arm entirely, and it increases flavor. So your Kentucky caps will be frustum with a cone that angles downward, and that minimizes the amount of reflux within the cap itself. But they normally had a pretty good size, oversized cap on those, and it allowed for a little bit of reflux, so it kept the proof up. So you gotta realize, a long time ago when china was being made, they didn't have the starting gravity that we have today. It was tough to get a 1080 without the enzymes and stuff that we have today. Using the malts as best they could, like a corn malt, would help it some. And if they didn't, they use sugar. But for the ones that just use pure corn, that's why the thumper, the second distillation, because normally, they come off the still at lower proofs, and they'd have to run it again to boost the proof, right? Well, we don't have that problem these days, and they changed the recipes. They started adding a lot more sugar to increase the proof and the starting proof and all that. But just a pure corn, that was just cooked and using the endogenic enzymes of malted corn, it didn't really fully convert. So they're using a 1040, 1050 was considered a decent conversion back then. And that's what they were running, and you just don't get that big a concentration of alcohol when you have that and you run it through just a regular pot still. You're going to come off at 80, 90 proof, and it's just not that high proof like they wanted. But it is flavorful. But they wanted the higher proof and higher efficiency. So they created the thumper. Yep, that's right. Yep, that's the reason. Yep. And and a lot of times you'll see, back in the old days, moonshine 1X, 2X, or 3X. That's how many times they ran it, and they didn't rerun it for flavor or anything else. They ran it to boost the proof, because it was, nobody wanted 80 proof moonshine, that came off, and it was in a lot of water and tailsy tasting. They wanted to boost up that alcohol and get more, you know, esters out of it and different flavors. So they bumped up, um, started using sugar, but back in the old days, sugar was pretty expensive. And then all of a sudden it wasn't when they started making it a big thing. And I guess that was in the early 20s and 30s when sugar really started getting a little bit less expensive. And by the 40s, it was, it wasn't too bad. And then that's, man, when that happened, man, when sugar prices went down, that's really um, decreased the quality of alcohol considerably, the moonshine, because it's basically that's all you saw to the steel site was a bunch of sugar bags and corn bags, and they just make that thin mash like I did forever. And there's this lazy shine. It's easy to do, and it tastes okay. You can make some decent thin mash, but it's just not like an all grain like we have today. And don't let anybody kid you. The moonshine in the right hands, moonshine today is better than it's ever been in the right hands, because there's just so many more tools and knowledge. And question here on the worm box volume flakes, what we call a flake stand, but yeah, worm box volume. Is there an average way to figure size needed based on mash volume in the pot, like Weigal? There is. I'm sure if you broke it down into kilocalories and there is, I'm sure, a formula for sure. But most people, as long as it's big enough or oversized, it's okay. It just becomes a problem when it's undersized. And a lot of these little Bever pots that we deal with a lot of beginners having, especially with those little 3 pots, they're grossly undersized, terribly undersized. Which a lot of people, start talking about. Wait, what do we need? How much is too much? And it's definitely, when you're dealing with worms and flakes, it's better to have too much than too little. That's for sure. Too much doesn't create any inefficiencies. Actually, too much just makes it more efficient and less circulation that you're going to require, right? And some, I guess, you can get large enough to where you don't even have to hardly circulate at all. It's just so large that it can handle the volume if you have a smaller steel. But there is a formula: steel size versus how long you're going to run it versus the temperature of the water you got in and the volume of the actual flake, right? So there is, I'm sure there's a formula for that, and I could probably find it for you if you'd like. But it probably breaks it down into kilocalories and thermal units. But generally speaking, we talk about the size of the actual copper pipe. So like a 5/8, 3/4 or 5/8, you know, for a 40-gallon steel or less in maybe a 20-gallon flake, a 15 to 20-foot run would be plenty sufficient, overly sufficient. You could probably go on up to 60 gallons with one. So there is a size, that but it's best to oversize it. If you don't know, it's best to overdo it on the coil and the flake size. And the larger you get, it's just easier to run. It makes it a lot easier for you to run. You can regulate, like Richard was asking the question earlier, what's the best temperature of the distillate coming off? You know, we know that it's between 60 and 75, somewhere sweet spot in there. You know, varies. Everybody's got an opinion on that, but that is the Cinderella zone or the sweet spot. You know, between those. So the larger the flake stand that you have, the less fluctuations in temperature you're going to see, right? So it's easier to regulate, and when you got one that size, you know, it's a lot easier to keep a constant, and then you can make small adjustments as you need to. Whereas, like if you got a Liebig, you know, just the slightest change means all the difference in the world, because you know you're forcing water through a single tube that's a few foot long, and it's night and day. So the difference in the water going into those, if it changes, it's a drastic change. So yeah, it makes a huge difference. A damn good question. I will try to find that. And for a lot of people, it'll just be trial and error, you know, instead of a, you know, X over Y equals Z or whatever type formula. It's just going to be, you know, kind of a trial and error thing. Most people do, though. If you can overdo it, do overdo it, because it just makes it more efficient if you do. And it's definitely, but the little Bever 3 pots that we talk about and deal with, this is just, it's the worst. And it sits right on top of the pot too. That it's, you know, you need to get it away from that heat, right? So it's easy to regulate, keep cool, and they have them come and sit right on top of the pot, and it's just so inefficient. It's the worst design ever. That's right. Awesome. It is time for a shot. I have to chase it down with a little Baja Blast. Think a little 100 proof peach. That tastes a lot like peach. It's my peach. It doesn't taste a lot like peach. It's sweet. It's got a unique sweetness to it. I use the Olive Nation um, concentrates with it, and it just didn't carry through at all. But it has good sweetness to it. Good, unique sweetness, but it's just not. It's not peachy. Not peachy at all. But it's not a bad drink. It's just not the peach I wanted. I would recommend anybody starting to not use a thumper at all. A thumper is kind of an intermediate to advanced distilling. Uh, I wouldn't recommend using it at all. I'd say just use a straight going into that. Now, if you wanted to have like a little infuser that you wanted to try to infuse some flavor with, you know, sure, I'd recommend, you know, trying. I don't particularly like the jar rigs, but they seem to work okay. But there's a, you know, there's a risk of it getting broken, burns, getting it off and on, and glass breaking. So if you could, hopefully more people start making. I've been trying to push for it for years, and I see some people doing them, but if they just make a little copper chamber instead of a jar, just a copper chamber with an infusion port at the top, a drain at the bottom, and a sight glass if you want to look and see how much is in there. But that would be so much better and safer, you know, if everybody just infused with those. Just put your 1/2 inch valve at the bottom, drain everything off, an infusion port at the top, and put your bypass on it so you can bypass while you're doing all these changes, and you can, you know, re-infuse without having, you know, uh, alcohol and pressure and vapor coming up and out. Um, but yeah, I would recommend everybody just going with a straight pot, you know, and that's why I like these Vevers. If you're not familiar with them, they're very simple with the football steel, very simple. Um, I recommend those for everybody, or a keg. But the keg just doesn't have the cap, but you can get a, you know, a horse head or a cap to put on a keg just the same. So but it's, you know, it's something that you're going to have to buy in addition to, so it's not going to be something that just comes with it. But this right here is what we were talking about earlier, and I'm not sure if you can see the on my screen, the live kind of hides a little valve at the top, but there's a little valve at the top. And you can see at the very bottom, right next to that airlock on it, there's a little valve coming off the bottom there. Now I use that valve off the bottom. That takes what tails that this collects, inside there. But this is a great little setup for the money. It's probably one of the best deals that you can get, or a keg. A keg's going to be a lot more solid, heavy duty. You're going to be able to run a little bit of column off a keg because of its rigidity. This lid's kind of flimsy. It's kind of a lightweight stainless. It's a nice pot, and you can see that little ring about 6 inches, 4 inches off the bottom. There's a false bottom in that, so you could actually, theoretically, which I'm going to try. I haven't yet, but I want to. Sparge off some grains and get all the fine stuff off, and put some grains in there, maybe some like a little cracked corn or something in there to distill on the grain, and see what kind of flavors I can pull using that. But this is a decent cap coming off here. This is, if you could put this on a keg as well, or a cap, it's a decent cap. It's not the frustum, coming up at an angle, or the coffee can coming up, but it's similar. And you can take this little canister condenser off, which is okay. It's not bad. I like it better than probably a Liebig, but not as well as a shotgun, and definitely not as well as a good sized worm. But yeah, having one of these to start with is, if yeah, I would highly recommend these. They make a great starter still, and it's good for intermediates as well. And you can take off this little canister filter here and come out with a spool. It's all ferrules and tri-clamps, so you can come off there and go into a thumper. If you wanted to add thumpers to this, Philby and them make thumpers and all kinds. They make jar rigs, come off this cap, go straight into jar rigs. Probably put you together a copper rig, proper copper one too, if you ask them. And they specialize in a lot of this, because they know that there's millions of these sold, and there's a good reason why. And it's the reason I recommend it. I think Alan Bishop has talked about it. He kind of had questions. A lot of people, there was a lot of hype about the Devers. I think they got a bad rep because of the shitty 3 pots that they turned out that required, immediate work to resize the worm, and because of the gaskets are fragile and easy to over tighten and break. But once you got all that done, they were perfectly fine little boilers, and made stainless pots, all you need, right? So I think these are pretty good. Probably what I definitely recommend for a beginner, this or a keg. And if you get a keg, you can get a football to put on it, or a horse head, and get you a proper whiskey cap, and you can run it just straight, pot still mode. And that's definitely how I'd recommend beginners run it. Now, if you want to increase your proof, I mean, it should come off this right here. If you get a decent mash, and it's anywhere from 10 to 14%, you're going to come off at about 140 proof, which is perfectly fine. That's all you really need. You get good flavor. You get enough proof to go into a barrel. So, and definitely something you want to proof down to drink straight. Or so, yeah, you can straight off this, you can get some pretty decent product, and you'll be surprised. And there's a lot of features on this. You can ferment in this. That's why they put this little airlock on there. So, you could put a cap off the top where the football is, and just there's just a cap there that you can shut that off, and you can use your little airlock, and you can ferment in this. And when you get done, you can rack it off into a bucket, clean it out, set it up there, pour your clears in there, and distill it. So you can do everything in one pot. You can also boil your water in this to steep your corn. So it's pretty good little setup in it, and it out of the box you can use it without any kind of modifications or anything like that. You can use it, and that's awesome for that reason. For somebody that doesn't want to like take a keg and take out the spear and then get maybe a port welded in the bottom for a drain, or larger port for the top, which I used a keg steel for a long time. And my biggest qualm with the keg steels was trying to keep them clean. I didn't have pressure washer, and I've said it a million times, but I repeat it so everybody understands that it was harder to clean. So, every once in a while I'd take it to the car wash and spray it out, with just regular water. I didn't use any soaps or anything on it, but I didn't have a pressure washer. But now they've got these little heads that spiral. I guess they spit out the sides, so you can. I'm hearing that they use it in plumbing a lot to help clean out lines and stuff. But you could, stick one in there and they have it clean the sides in and out a few times with that would be awesome, right? And cleaning out that keg. So, kegs and these stills right here, definitely for beginners, 100%. Now, I will say a keg, you can't put on a stovetop. Um, right? This you can put on a stovetop, a gas stove, you can put it on propane, you can put it on turkey burners. Uh, but if you do use an electric stove, make sure that you don't have one that cycles on and off, hot and cold, and regulates. If you got one that, like I've got, an old Frigidaire, like 15, 17 years old, I turn that sucker to 8 or 9, it stays on the whole time. It just gives you full blown power, doesn't thermostatically control shit. It's awesome. But some of the newer ones kind of kick on and off, so that's not good. You don't want one that does that. If it does, then probably best off using gas or going with an element, which is where I'm going to go next. I've got some kegs and I'm going to weld in a 2-inch ferrule on the side, and I bought an element, and I'm going to put together a SCR module for it, and getting the parts all together. So that's going to be beginning of the year kind of project. I think there's going to be some of my stocking stuffers or something. I put it on my wish list. I better get them. No, she heard that. I put them on my list. But I already got I ordered my element. Yeah, they used to ration it, man. Yeah, back in the 1800s, sugar was very expensive, and in the early 1900s, it was expensive. But I guess around the Depression, after the Depression of 40s, I guess in the 30s and 40s, it started to become a little less expensive. And by the time we got to the 50s and 60s, it was relatively cheap. And that's when everybody, started lighting their fires with sugar bags on the still sites, because it was it was just as common to see somebody packing sugar as corn after that. Yeah, I think running a single pot, it's simplified, but really you don't need that extra distillation. I think a lot of people lose a lot of flavor in thumpers, and you really don't need a distillate coming off any more than what comes off this football. And I need to move that so y'all can see the chat. But um, I get 130 to 40 proof consistently off mine, and that's really all you need. You can't beat that. So, and to go into a barrel or whatever, I mean, these that's pretty fine. 100, I think 30 or something is the cutoff for bourbon. What is it, Clint? Is it 130 proof or something like that for bourbon? Can't go in the barrel any higher than that. Yeah, I remember the S&H screen stamps. Actually, sad enough, I might have some around here somewhere. And them little books, used to let them in the books. Yeah, I think I've got some around here. You got some too. So you're about as hoarder as I am, ain't you? You tell these hoarders. Yeah, as far as temp goes, pot stills just it's not something that you can just set it and forget it kind of thing. Every still is going to be different, so temperatures vary. I will say, let me give this chart here, and it kind of helps. Let's see, here we go. All right, this chart here shows there's a relationship between. I'm going to turn this off, so chat off. So I'm sorry, but everybody can see this. I know it's blocking mine. So if you look at the bottom axis, this is the concentration of alcohol. So this is not proof. This is ABV, which is right. So something that is 100 ABV or is 200 proof, right? So it only goes to 100, which would be 200 proof. So that's the highest theoretical that alcohol can get, right? And then on the left side, this is temperatures in Fahrenheit, okay? Now, a lot of people tend to believe that because ethanol boils at 173.1 degrees, that you can run a still at about 175 and just boil off the ethanol and leave everything else behind. Now, that would be wonderful. If that were the case, um, distillation would be so much easier, and it would just be so much easier to make cuts and do these things. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. If it did right at 150 degrees, man, you could be just cooking off all your heads, right? All your heads just methanol and everything be gone, right? No, unfortunately, it's azeotropic, which means that when they bond together, all these different compounds in there, ethyl acetates, acetones, there's so many, uh, isopropyls, propyls. I mean, there's lots of different alcohols and compounds in there. And those combined along with water, which is also azeotropic, changes because it's azeotrope. When you mix them together, it changes the boiling point based on the percentages of what's in there, right? So the more ethanol that's in there, then yeah, you get closer to until you get to pure ethanol. Yeah, you can distill pure ethanol at 173.1 degrees and it'll just cook right off of itself, right? So if that's just pure ethanol, you can heat it up and it won't do anything to 173.1, then it'll begin to boil at 173.1. But as we add water to it, the boiling point changes. And that's what this graph shows. The more water it's got, the higher the boiling point, all the way up to 211 that get to the boiling point of water, right? And that's theoretical high. So, and that's when you have zero alcohol and pure water, then it'll be at the other end of the scale. So when somebody says, yeah, I distilled all that off and I turned my still up to 178 degrees and I cooked it all off, well, you would have to have 120 proof mash to do that. I don't know anybody that has mash. It'd be dangerous to actually run it at that temperature in a typical pot still. So that would, no. You'd have to have 120 proof mash to cook it off at 178 degrees. You can see where 60 is on here. That's 120 proof. And you slide over to the left, that's right between 175 and 80. Doesn't happen, right? So at 178 degrees, you don't have shit coming off your mash. All these people saying they do that. No, they don't even have smoke underwater at that point, which is kind of a condensation thing of between just because it's hot and there's moisture in the air. That has nothing to do with cooking anything off the steel. Now, people say, "Oh, I see something coming off." That's because at the very bottom of the steel, where the gas is hitting it, it's hot down there, right? It's probably 190 some degrees down there. So you're going to get some distillation coming off that very bottom where that gas is hitting the bottom of the pot because it's that hot. But the rest of the liquid in that column or in the pot um, is not that temperature, so it's doing nothing, right? So if you have it circulated, it'll help prevent that. But you will see, like when you boil water, you'll see some little bubbles start at the bottom, and you'll do that too in distillation. But it's not because it's boiling at 100. You check the temperature on the top. That's going to be a far different temperature than what's right next to that flame and what's next to that steel in the bottom of your pot, right? So there is some temperature differences major. But yeah, so most of your mash is in between 10 and 20% ABV down here, right? So look in between 10, 20. And most of it's going to be right around 10 and a little over 10. So you slide up the column about 195 degrees, right? So at a 12 is about right at 195. So the temperature of the mash itself is going to have to reach that point before you're really going to see what, any kind of distillation coming off and things coming off. This is just a guide though. That doesn't mean that you run it at at a certain temperature. Most steels you'll run wide open, right? Unless you've got some particulates in there and you don't have an agitator, you need to stir it, right? But most people run it wide open until they start getting a drip, and then they start cutting it back a little bit to regulate the drip coming off. Now, different size pots will have different size drips. When I say drip, sometimes it's a stream. Most often it's a stream, unless you have a 5 or 10 gallon pot, in which case it's probably going to be a fast drip. But once you get to 20, 30 gallons, you have a real fine stream. Once you get to 100 gallons, it's going to be, maybe, well, not quite the size of a pin, but it's going to be, it's going to be a pretty decent little drizzle coming off there, right? So, and also the speed at which you run stripping runs versus, flavor runs, you can, that'll vary, but you definitely don't want to just run at a certain temperature. And when people talk also about temperature, are they talking about the temperature of the liquid in the pot, or are they talking about the vapor temperature where that thermometer is on the column, or the temperature of the distillate coming out of the worm? There's three distinct differences in temperatures. The pot temperature is going to be hottest. You're going to have a little cooler temperature in the column, or in your distillation path, right? Because it's starting to condense, it's already cooling off as it gets to that. So your highest temperature is going to be in the liquid in the pot. Then you're going to be a little cooler temperature here and much cooler temperature coming off the drip. So those are the three temperatures. If you want to monitor temperatures, you also need to monitor the temperature of the coolant going into your flake, or, especially the smaller it is, the more important it becomes. The larger it is, the easier it is to regulate, like we were talking earlier. So, yeah, 50 foot is awesome. If you run 50 foot, man, you could run a 100-gallon still. But I would say being half inch, probably wouldn't want to go beyond 20. If you get a larger steel, I'd go with the 5/8, which is, it comes in a coil, so you don't want to buy sticks, right? You get the coil copper, comes in a box already coiled up for you, ready to go. 5/8 is a good one to get. It's generally about the same price as half, and a little bit bigger. You got that 1/8 inch more to work with, and 20 foot of that is plenty for a 50-gallon still or smaller, easy. And in a 20-gallon uh, flake or barrel, what we use these days, plastic barrels, that'd be fine. you know um, more than enough, and that's definitely what you want. It makes it a lot easier, definitely makes it a lot easier, and you don't have to worry about having as many chillers and keeping your water cold and all that. And you could basically, a lot of people are using totes, 250-gallon totes. They'll catch rainwater, and they'll have two totes. They'll feed their one tote into the condenser, and then the hot water out to the next tote. They just let that cool off and then run it back and forth each time. And 250-gallon tote, you should be able, if it's pretty cool water, you should be able to regulate it pretty easily. And if you're not, you can always just drop you can get you a jug, a water jug, milk jug with water in it, and freeze it. Just add that into your flake in the middle of the coil, and that'll help keep it cooler. If you have problems keeping it cool enough, and your water that you're using is not cool enough, you can add that to it, or you could add it there in the actual reservoir. A lot of people are using big totes, for their reservoirs. That works real well. I have good questions tonight, man. I'm digging it. I hope that clears. As far as temperature wise, though, it's more important to watch the drip and the rate of drip based on your still size than those temperatures. But it is good to know that when you do see these temperatures get to a certain point, well, it's pretty much about 195, 96 in my pot. I can expect to, be seeing something come drip soon instead of having to reach up there and touch it and feel how hot it is, like the old times, oh, damn, it should be going in, I can feel it, it's moved this far, it's hot, hot, I can't touch it for this long a period of time. I mean, how many blisters are you going to go through till you put a thermometer on there? Just don't care. Most people just don't care. They go by that drip, and as soon as it starts dripping, that means it's probably around 195 to 200 inside that pot. Now you don't want to get too high. You don't want to run it too hot and get over and get too much going on at once, because it's a little bit harder to separate. As in doing the stripping run tends to be run hotter, and flavor runs tends to be run a little slower. So that's something that you can adjust to and by the drip. Yep. But yeah, that half inch that'll do. That'll do a pretty good size steel. Most all hobby steels can be done on half, no problem at all. So, you know, a 50-foot coil would be more than enough. You could easily get two, coils out of that for 50-gallon steels or less. Right. And that's where they're starting to use a lot of these big totes. I'm talking about the metal cages with the plastic, those big totes, those hold a lot, and a lot of people are using those to catch rainwater and use. And having two of them, like I say, you can pump out of one, the hot water into the next, and then the next time just reverse it, right? Drop your pump in the other one and go back. Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad. It's what's needed. It's a little bit more expensive though, when the jar rigs were just so cheap, to introduce and get everybody into it. But infusers work quite well. They're very very efficient. And they add a lot of flavor. They do work well, and for making brandies, it's notable the difference in not having one versus having one is a very notable difference. So the quality of brandy's definitely gone up since people started using infusers. But I've been pushing them for somebody to make copper for several years, and they have been, but it's just a lot of people just not willing to chuck out the two, $300, $400 it's going to take to make one. They're expensive. They're not real big. You're looking at a little gallon unit, half gallon to a gallon. You don't want them to get too big, because then it takes a lot of the infusion juice, and that stuff pretty much pureed fruit, so it gets expensive. So you don't want to have one that's too big, and then you don't have one that's too small. But I do an inline infusion, but my chamber's just been too small, and I increased the size of it trying to get more flavor out of it, and it's just causing a little bit of back pressure, and it's just not working out as well as expanding out, right? So I tried to expand the size of it and have a big U dip, and it's just not working out as well as I'd want it to, versus just having a larger chamber to get that increased amount of flavor. And so yeah, it's all work in process. And you can't be ashamed to admit when you're wrong. Many scientists have made mistakes until they get that eureka moment, and then they hit on something big, kind of like I did with my bypasses a long time ago. But yeah, the having the copper infusion chambers is definitely going to be a game changer. It's just not dangerous. It's dangerous, right? You're not getting the grill gloves on and undoing it and having vapors shooting out while you're trying to get another jar on there. And, if you don't have the bypass on it, which is an essential thing, really, to make it safe. Um, so it definitely changed it a lot, and for the better, for sure. I'm not. Yeah, I have to look and see it. Oh, the thumper. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's fine. You know, that shape's fine. But for an infuser, I just round, just like a coffee can, right? Just round, large enough at the top where you can have that 2-inch infusion port right in a valve where you can dump and dump it in. So you have a little spool on top of that. You can preload it, you know, hit that bypass so you don't get a lot of vapors feeding up, making it bubble and spit. I've been there. And being able to dump it, and then a, you know, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch drain the bottom so you can dump it all out, you know. And I'm thinking about having a retort, having, you know, when you dump out that infusion from the bottom, have it go into the still. That way you're sending a lot of that flavor into the distillate that's getting turmoiled and boiled. And so you add that, it's just going to add flavor to your back set that's in there boiling, right? So just instead of having to try to funnel it in like I do, so just trying to retort from your bottom of that right in there. Now you don't want to get something that's going to drop to the bottom thick, that's going to drop to the bottom heavy and burn or scorch. But you know, while it's boiling, it should be keeping things stirred up pretty well in there. So just take those infusion juices, dump them right out from that copper chamber, right back into the boiling pot, retort it, shut your valve, open it up, your infuser, boom, drop your new infusion juice. Because really the way those work is you have to re-infuse like every quart or two, depending on the size of your infuser, and 2 or 3, you know, next to each other seems to work a lot better too. That way you can kind of concentrate them. So definitely, it's awesome. I think just going with the drip and staying in your sweet spot. Once you get it dripping, you'll adjust your heat up and down to get the drip where you want it. And once you get to used to using that drip, you'll only in those thermometers that come with all this Chinese stuff. They're cheap as fuck. You know, it can be a 5 degree difference from what it actually is. You know, they're just real cheap uh, thermometers that they put on there. So it's not going to be really accurate what temperature it is, but it will give you an idea of when you can expect, you know, and that's what I like about the thermometer on mine is when I see it at a certain temp, I know, well, I can be expecting to drip anytime, you know, and sure enough, a few minutes later, here comes the drip. A minute or two later, you know, all right, yep, we're starting to drip, you know, but it's not a must, right? So once you see that drip, well, I guess we're at that same temp, you know. So once you get experience, it doesn't matter, but it is something nice to refer to. I'm more concerned with the temp of the distillate coming off and the coolant going into my flake than I am with any other temp on the still, because that's all regulated, you know, by the drip itself, and you can adjust your flame to get a fine, you know, fine drip. When I say drip, it can be a stream, so it's not necessarily a drip because you're really not going to be dripping off anything, you know, larger than a 10, 20 gallon still. You know, you're going to have a small stream, right? But yeah, for beginners, if it gives them something comfort in knowing, but just want to make sure that, and two, you know, we were talking about thumpers being a little bit more intermediate too. Something else to think about is the back pressure involved with a thumper, and when you add that thumper, you no longer have an open air environment inside your still. So anytime you add that thumper or these infusion chambers, you don't have open air anymore. So when you stop distilling, you need to open that cap up somehow, or your still is going to implode, right? So anytime that you add those, you do need to be aware that when you stop, you need to open up a valve in that cap or on the top of your still or somewhere to allow the temperature fluctuations to regulate, right? Because it's gonna, if it doesn't, it's gonna pull as much liquid as it can from that thumper backwards into the steel, and if it can't pull it fast enough, it sucks up. So, and that's just thermodynamics, and you know, law of thermodynamics, and if it cools off. Have you seen them experiment with those 55-gallon drums? People, oh, you couldn't, no, big drums. They take those 55-gallon drums, heat them up, and when they get to a certain temperature, they'll take the heat off and spray them with a garden hose, and they'll suck right in. Man, it's cool as shit. But so that's something else to consider too, you know, and for a beginner to also, I've seen a lot of people take brand new copper steels, man, and they didn't realize that, and they had that thumper on there, and it's like the first time they ever ran, they didn't know, they didn't have the vacuum release and all that on there, and I wouldn't trust a $2,000 steel to a $4 part either. So if you can, it's always good to put a half, 3/4 inch ball valve on the top of your steel or in the cap. Either one works as long as you just open that ear up. And when you get done running, when you turn that heat off, immediately open. That should be the first thing you do. Open that valve up, and that way you can regulate the pressure, and you don't get a lot of vacuum. Hello, Miss Tammy. Good to see you in here, hon. Hope you and all had a good Thanksgiving and a Merry Christmas. Yeah. And two, yeah, and it depends on your steel, right? To what size a drip you got coming off. Like I said, 5 to 10 gallon, it's just going to be a drip, 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 right? But you get to 15, 20, you run off a keg or one of these footballs that are 18 and a half or something to 20, it's going to be just like if you go in your bathroom and you adjust the water as much as you can without it being a drip, but without it pouring, right? And it's just a real fine, maybe the size of a toothpick or bigger, just a fine stream. If you can get that coming off a 20, 15 to 20, that's fine. But of course, like I say, you get up to 50-gallon steels, you're going to get, maybe pencil lead sized or a little bigger. And then, you get to 100-gallon plus, it's going to be, pencil sized, and you get up to 200-300-gallon steels, it's going to be, like it's coming out of a garden hose. You get some of these 1,000 gallons, man, it's like a fire hose. Nah, not like fire hydrant, but I mean, it comes gushing out, man. If you go to some of these, um, distilleries with big, huge steels, and you see the volume of coming off there, man, it'll amaze you, man. It's just far from the drips we're used to. Yeah, the slower you run, the higher the proof's going to be because um, you're increasing, you're decreasing the amount of reflux. So you're going to have more product, but it's slow, and that's why people strip a little faster and higher heat, strip it off and just to strip it. And then when they do their flavor runs, they do it a little bit slower to decrease the proof and increase the flavor. So when you run slower, you will get a higher proof. Strangely enough. Yeah, yeah, it's fine, and that's what I liked about my thermometer. I look at it, and in the old days, you just touch the steel at different spots to figure out where the heat was, right? Where it's hot to a certain point where you knew it was going to start dripping before it started dripping. But I mean, that didn't really change anything. You really don't adjust the fire until you see the drip coming off. And then if it's a drip, well, I need to rake some of these coals off the fire, right? That's the way I started. Need to get some of this wood out from underneath or get too hot, or you need to let's add another piece of wood to the fire. It's dripping pretty damn slow. We're not hot enough, and you'd have to take a stick and pull some coals back or shove some more in there, increase the heat and regulate it that way. That's pretty tough. But it was still by the drip. And I don't think it's necessarily a mistake, looking at your thermometer. It's good to know, and if it gives you some comfort in knowing, okay, this is that, it's good to know, really. And I think it's really good to know for people to know a bullshitter when they hear him talk, because these people said, I just still mine at 178 degrees. Well, we know that that's not true, because at 178 degrees, you would have to be at 120 proof. I mean, that's already a high proof alcohol. You're not distilling that. So you're not getting shit off at 178, unless it's in a fractional, not in a pot still, right? So in a fractional, now I will say there's vacuum distillation. So I should say at regular pressure and temperature, because there is vacuum distillation that you can get things coming off at a lower temperature under a vacuum, right? Depends on how many atmospheres you change. So yeah, under a vacuum, you can get something coming off at that temperature, but that's not pot still, and that's different. That's not a it's kind of advanced. But yeah, there is vacuum distillation, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. In the marijuana industry, they like keeping all those terpenes and flavonoids and all these things in when they distill these things. And if you want to use alcohol to take out, leach the cannabinoids and the THCs and the resins and all that, then distillation works, and you can maintain a lot more flavor if you use a vacuum distillation, right? Because it lowers the temperature, and you can lower it considerably. And the lower the temperature, we know that a lot of these flavors and the flavonoids and all these things coming off increase. So, and in the gin industry, there's some of your better gins are made in vacuum distillation because a lot of the botanicals retain more flavor at these lower boiling points, because the higher the boiling points, the more flavor that you lose. So, that's something that, you'll probably see a lot more of in the future, some vacuum distillation. But that's advanced. Yeah. What's going on, Dan? Let's see, brother. Right, and that's a column. I like having one in the pot though, because that tells me what my pot temps is, and then having one in the column itself tells me what my vapor temperature is, and then having that temperature, when you have the drip coming off and you've got that parrot, you should have your little thermometer sitting in that parrot right with it. That way you can kind of regulate the temperature of the distillate coming off. So if it's a little bit warm, you need to increase the flow into your flake, or you might need to drop a jug of ice in there to kind of cool it off a little bit to lower, the temperature down in your distillate coming off, right, to a certain point. So, the thermometers are needed, and it's, there are in different distillation processes like fractional distillation we were talking about, and um, then temperatures become a lot more important, um, especially in, we were talking earlier about um, using reflux in your columns, and how the higher temperature stuff's at the top, medium temperature and the lower temperature. Um, yeah, it's very important to know what the temperatures of those are, and you'll see they'll have a big huge computer, and it'll show, they'll have a big screen sitting there, and it'll show you exactly what the temperature is at the top of the column, in the middle, and at the bottom, and yeah. Yeah, and in the rectification, right, and you'll see those different temperatures. They'll all be right there on a computer program, right on a screen in front of them, or on a dial somewhere. They'll have it. Depends on how advanced they are, but yeah, yeah. 50 feet. That's a good size. You can get 2 or 3 worms out of that. 20 footer, 20-25 is super adequate for anything we use up to 40. But 40-50 would be nice to have one that size. Uh, and it takes a larger flake to handle that. In which case, it's always good to overshoot though. It's better to have too much than too little. I think that'd be a good idea, Richard, for sure. That way you don't want to reflux your heads back into into your pot. And that's essentially what it does. That's why I don't turn my deflegnator on until I'm, in right at the low heads, right when I'm getting ready to start into the hearts, is when I turn on the flow of water going into my deflegnator, or deflameter, however everybody pronounces it. I call it deflegnator. So Absolutely. You know, don't turn that fan on till then. It damn sure, you know, that way you won't reflux and compress those heads back into the steel for sure. Richard's a smart old boy, ain't he? Welcome back, brother. Yeah, man. That's awesome, brother. Just finished the thumper, got the bypass, good size infuser. That's awesome. Let us know the results, man. And if you got any questions, you know where to come. Just we'll be here Tuesdays and Saturdays. Uh, I guess the 20th, this next Saturday, we're going to talk about wine making. We've had a lot of wine and brandy making. For those that get mad about us talking about wine, it's wine and brandy making. So, but people don't understand, you know, when moonshiners talk about making wine, it's right to making beer, to make a mash, to make a brandy, maybe, right? Or they might just drink it as a beer, or we might just drink it as wine. So, you know, a lot of my musts are, I start out as hopefully a good wine. If they don't make that great of a wine, they certainly go into the pot, make an okay brandy. Definitely a lot better brandy than wine. A lot of them, you know, they just everything doesn't always work out. No matter how much you know or how little you know, it's you know it's that blind squirrel thing. Always finds a nut, or you know, everybody. It's there's just so many variables involved. That's awesome, man. I look forward to hearing your results. Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah, start low on your condenser, work your way back. Don't start at the top because who was it that said that? I don't know if it was Mark said it or Digger. I don't remember who was it that said that. No, it was what's his name, the comedian. Here's my mind going. Bean said, you know, hot metal and cold metal look the same, don't they? You know, you can't tell by looking at it. Old bees. Yeah, when you start feeling it, you can't look at it. I don't know. I guess once it gets so hot when you're welding and soldering, it does start turning a little color, but you don't get near that temperature on the copper. I don't know. Maybe down there next to that propane, it might discolor a little bit. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's you get them big old, 4, 5, 600,000 gallon, submarine pots like they had back in the day. Shoot, yeah, man, it pours out of that thing. You watch them buckets just fill up slowly, man. The way we do it is take all day. But yeah, you'd be surprised that larger steels proportionally cook off at about the same. So, and I'm sure there's exemptions to this rule, but you could run a 40-gallon pot, and as long as you have the proper vapor path size, that's another thing about some of these vevers that have these little 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch lines coming off a big 10-gallon pot. That's just too small. You creating a lot of pressure inside that pot, and we know with increased pressure comes increased temperature, and that we talked about earlier. When you run things too hot, it seems to all come off at once, so it's harder to make your cuts, right? And that's what happens when you get that real small line on there. It creates enough pressure where it's really hard to make cuts because it's hard to regulate the temperature of the pot, right? Well, the 178 is, well, the 173.1 is what ethanol, will will boil at if it's just ethanol, pure ethanol. 178, I guess on some fractional distillation columns, right, 178 will be kind of in the middle. Your cooler temperatures, of course, are going to be lower down, but I don't think it gets that cool, even in the column. There's not going to be a lot of differences in temperature. So you're going to maybe have 198, 200 at the top, and then maybe where your hearts are is going to be just a temp, maybe a few degrees cooler. I'm not running a big, huge column like that. So Clint may be able to answer that question better than me, but I don't think there's going to be a huge difference between the top and bottom. I know that when I run my pot and I see my pot temp, at 198, and then I see my temperature in my column, and it's two different thermometers. So I know they're not that accurate. They're not really paired, so they're not going to really read the same right temperatures, but it's not a degree or so two difference at the most. Well, now these are intentionally creating a vacuum. Now the stills themselves are big, thick, huge thick walled. I mean, yeah, they can handle the pressure, bro. Really, really thick, heavy duty sons of bitches. I mean, man, they're like half-inch, three-quarter-inch stainless pots that they can handle, that kind of vacuum, and the tops are bolted down all the way around. They got it's definitely able to handle it, and it's designed for that. And they lower it several atmospheres, and they can get it where alcohol cooks off at 110, 20 degrees, right? Fair enough. But what you got to get the vacuum, and you got to get that many atmospheres. That's why it's different at sea level versus up on at the top of the Rockies. You're going to have a different result in distilling temperatures depending on where you are, right? But yeah, those vacuum, man, you should see some of the heavy duty, man. They're just crazy. And the people in the marijuana industry would be familiar with those. They use something very similar to that. Welcome back, brother. It's been a while. How you been? Yes, it has been a little bit. You been doing all right? I certainly do remember you. I remember because there's a gal I know in England whose last name is Carmack, and when I saw you, it kind of reminded me of her. I try to associate people like that so I can remember them. Until I see you all the time, then you probably won't want me to remember you. But yes, good to see you, brother. I hope you've been doing all right, man. Right, and vapor velocity is a very important thing too, and being able to, when you have that small line coming off your pot, it creates a lot of back pressure, and it really increases the temperature in the pot, and it's hard to regulate that temperature, right? That's the most important place to have one, really, brother. Right? It is about that time again. Have some of this sweet peach. It doesn't taste like peach. Brandy's hard, man. It's tough, and I don't like the Olive Nation. Everybody, I usually uses the Tyranny or the Monin, and I switched to Olive Nation to check it out and try it, and it didn't carry flavor like the Tyranny and Monin did. And other people say that they got the same results. You got the odd sweetness out of it that I got. It's sweet and it tastes good, but it's just different and good and sweet drink. It's not a bad drink, but it's just not real peachy. But some people say that the other flavors that the Olive Nation has are real good. So I guess it's just hit and miss, depending on which one you use. Yeah, I'd definitely try to not run that fan, because I don't like it, and it really depends on what if you're wanting to do. If it's something that you're going to age, you can turn that fan on a little sooner and reflux some of those low heads back into it. That way you'll have some, to help in the aging process that we talk about. But if it's something that you're going to be drinking as a white dog, I probably would not use that fan until I got in the hearts. So it's just varies. Yeah, killer bees. Yes, he found that the hard way, didn't he? Yeah, he burnt the shit out of his finger, man. He put that shit. Oh God damn! I guess hot metal and cold metal look the same, don't they? That's something you don't do more than once if you got a mind. Is it a few degrees? Yeah, I didn't think it'd be a big difference. Yeah, I didn't think there would be, because in mine, and I wish my thermometers were calibrated with each other a little closer, but I think you can put them in the same damn liquid and they both read different by at least 3 degrees. So it's these damn cheap ass Chinese thermometers. Chad Jackson, what's going on, brother? Now, I don't know if you're the same Chad I grew up with, but I'd say probably not. Let's see. I want to make a sweet feed mash, never had anything but corn. Curious about the water and sugar ratio to add. Well, I would recommend, if you're going to do sweet feed, I'd recommend doing your own. Now everybody's different. Everybody has different tastes and preferences, and some people, you know, like certain things better than others. So I'm not going to say it. Personally, I've tasted just the sweet feed liquor, and I wasn't really impressed with it. I didn't like it that well, but somebody made some that was just cracked corn that they put molasses in, and that was good. So I don't know. Maybe it's just the difference in the distillers, but you get a lot of mixed answers about sweet feed shine, and there's been a lot of talk about it. I've never personally done it. After I drank some of it, I decided that's not the best. And I don't know if it had pellets in it and exactly what, you really need to look at what's in the ingredients in your sweet feed. So if it's got a lot of nutrients and a lot of supplemental things in there for the animal, I would probably kind of shy away from it. But if it's pretty much just cracked corn and molasses, the closer you can get to that, the better. But if it has any of the pellets in it at all, no, big no. But what's your goal? I mean, you're kind of making a corn rum, basically. You're mixing a little bit of molasses with a little bit of corn, so it's good. I've tried, just the molasses and corn, and it was a pretty interesting drink. It was good, but the sweet feed, now it could, like I say, it could just boil down to the person that made it, but it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. But yeah, I think it's better for post flavoring as well. But yeah, the sweet feed. Definitely look at the label, look at the ingredients, and see what all it's got in it. And if it's got a lot of iron, if it says iron in there, supplemental added iron or anything to do with iron, no, you should definitely don't. But a lot of them, they put a lot of extra nutrients and vitamins and supplements in there for the animal that really don't do well, especially the pelleted type that don't do well for the for the distilling of it. Damn, everybody sent the message at once. But to answer your question, hydrometer, you would definitely want to use your. I don't know why that didn't. Why does it do that? Okay. Now I've gotten away from the question. Use your hydrometer. So you never know exactly how sweet and how much molasses they're going to add to the different sweet feeds. I mean, it can vary so greatly. So it's not going to, you're not going to get someone to say, all right, for every 50-pound bag or every 25 pounds of sweet feed, you need to add X amounts of pounds of sugar, because it's going to vary so much. That's why one of the tools that become one of the most important tools you'll have is the hydrometer, the triple scale. Now, not the proofing hydrometer that we tell you to proof the alcohol. This is the one we measure the sugar content in our mashes with. It's called a triple scale, and so it'll tell you once you get your corn cooked and get your sweet feed and corn cooked and everything cooked off and the temperature back down. Now these are designed to be read at like room temperature, 60, 70 degrees. So there's a chart that you can make adjustments for, and you can drop it in. Make sure that you just strain off the liquid. Don't drop it in top on a bunch of grains, because it's going to affect how it floats if you put it on the grain. But sieve you off, so clean you, get you some good clean fluid in a cylinder or a jar, whatever that you can put your hydrometer in. Most people use a graduated cylinder, and just set your hydrometer in there and see how much sugar you got in there, and you can adjust it from that point. You can pretty much adjust your amount of sugar that you got, so you can get a 1060, 1070, whatever your starting gravity that you're shooting for. And also, when you do that, be sure to, when you're running sweet feed and stuff, be sure to use some glucoamylase in with it, to help a lot of those unfermentables get converted, so you get a pretty good conversion and get a pretty good, but a little bit more alcohol out of it. Um, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just definitely don't get the pelleted sweet feed, and just use your hydrometer to figure out how much sugar is needed, because it just varies so much. I wish I could say, yep, for every pound of sweet feed, you'll add a quarter pound of sugar or half pound of sugar. I just don't know, because it varies so much. You haven't had a good brandy. Oh man. I tell you what, there's some damn good brandies out here. We got some good distillers. I tell you, one of the better brandies I've tasted. Uh, well, my grop is technically a brandy, so that's probably the best brandy I've ever had in my life. It's so good. I can't think of anything more flavorful or as good and sweet. Make me want to go in there and get some. But we'll say that old Sandman Wes, he made a blackberry brandy. It's probably one of the best blackberry brandies I've tasted, and I've tasted, and they use infusers. So um, there's, now that the infusers are coming out, man, you're going to see a lot more brandies being made, and true brandies that's not post flavored, right? Um, yeah, there's a lot of good brandies, especially now we got these infusers. But yeah, old West made some damn good blackberry brandy, man. That was some of the best stuff, man. It was so good. It was very flavorful, not post flavored at all. It was really good. But yeah, it's making good brandy. If you can tell what fruit it was made with, you made a successful brandy. That's because it's hard to carry that flavor over, right? The whole distillation process is designed to remove impurities, flavors, and everything, make everything neutral. It's like water, right? We distill water to get just water. We want to take all the impurities out. Same thing with what happens during distillation of alcohol. And so to get that flavor to carry over, if you can get it to carry over and you can tell what fruit that it was made from by drinking it, then you've made a successful brandy. Now you get a lot of these brandies in the stores that are more of a cordial than a brandy. They're post flavored. They a lot of times that they're not going to be clear. You can take a clear liquor and take pretty much peach syrup out of a can of peaches and pour it in there, and it's going to get real fucking sweet and peachy, right? It's going to be, oh, it's so good. It is good, but that's not like a true brandy. But there's a lot of store bought brandies that are like that are real sweet and fruity, and that's because they pureed and sugared and carried that flavor and using like a Olive Nation, artificial flavoring and not natural flavoring to really push that flavor forward. Um, but to come off the drip, it's really tough. And Wes made some really good blackberry right off the drip. It was damn good. And I tasted some good peach brandy. Roger made some good peach brandy. At the contest a couple years ago, his brandy was good. Uh, April, she makes good. She makes real good brandy. There's quite a few in the community that can. John Bentz makes good brandy. There's quite a few people in the community that make good brandies, but none of them are better than my grappa. That's the best shit, man. I'm gonna have to go get me some now myself. Damn it. I'll be right back. 130 proof, man. That's actually the color in that is the tannins that came off these walnuts that I put in the bottom of it. So it's perfectly clear. Well, I had more walnuts than two, but I took them out so I didn't want to get it bitter, to let long-term aging. But it was funny looking. It was clear all the way down to right at the bottom where I had maybe 8-10 nuts in there, and you could see the red dye, or basically it's tannins coming off those nuts. And I was like, well, I'll be damned. It's going to color it a little bit. So it gave it the golden color, which I don't mind because it's basically the color of a white grape, which it started out as. Man, but if you've tried this, you know what I'm about to drink. If you haven't, man, I'm telling you, you'll not put a better brandy to your lips than this right here. For 130 proof, man, that's so good. So good, man. That sweetness. Now that's natural sweetness coming off those grapes. But that shit'll hit you, man. You can feel that. I've been drinking that 100 proof all night, and I can feel the warmth of that just moving down, man. It doesn't take much of that to get you lit. Yeah, it'd be a rumsky. I like it, rumsky. Or a bourbon rum, a bum. It's funny. Right. And that's going to be a vapor temp. But I use mine, we're still talking about temps. I like using mine to just see. I look up there and see it on the column, and I was like, all right, I should be getting a drip pretty soon. Yep, sorghum. They have a sorghum festival here in Kentucky every year, close to where my West Liberty. My cousins used to have a farm in West Liberty, and they raised cane, and also they raised peppers for Paramount Vegetable Company. But they raised a lot of cane, and they had one of them old time presses that the mule would walk around. There wasn't no mule there. We did it by hand. We'd get behind there and push it. Get the young kids in there. It's a game, right? It's fun. See how fast you push it. Yeah, I think eventually they got a ride mower to it, but um, yeah, it was a lot of fun. But they had sorghum and molasses and Yeah, I would definitely try to mix my own, and just get some good, molasses. You can get some great deals on molasses. Philbilly's got some. If you live close enough to him and can eliminate shipping, you'll not find a better price on it, hands down, anywhere. But if he has to ship, it's pretty heavy when you get a 5 gallon bucket. It's got some weight to it, probably 40 pounds. So it's not light. But yeah, probably one of the, and I think what's the name of that? And we checked it out. It's a pretty good grade molasses, and they use it. This is a distilling grade that they use in a distillery, um, but it's also good. It's a food grade. It's good enough to make you cookies with and stuff, right? So it's a pretty good grade of molasses. Trying to think, Golden Pearl or something like that. I can't think of the damn name, man. My mind's not what it used to be. And shit, I forgot to reshare the streams of some of these other groups I didn't get a chance to earlier. Let's see here. Let me do it quick. Mark and them were on, so I didn't get a chance to share it to you because I ain't gonna share it to somebody's group when they got their own damn stream going. That's rude. But let me share it everywhere else. Damn, that's ready to go. Yeah, I like jumping in there and him and Lisa's before this one. On Saturdays, I used to jump in there on his before when he did it on Saturday. I would jump in there and hang for a while until they. Let me share those in just a few more groups that way everybody get a chance to watch it. All right, now. But yeah, man, this. I'm gonna have to another sip of this. I tell you what, I can't. I normally don't brag on myself, but I definitely nailed it with that right there. That's a lot of people like Big Easy, Ian. He said the same thing. Man, that's some of the best shit I've ever put in my lips and drank. Man, it's so good. So if you come to a festival, you'll get a sip of it. I've got a little bit upstairs, so I got like I'm sending a pint to a buddy of mine up in Michigan, and probably the only thing I've ever mailed out. I've never, I don't deal with that because you're starting to break more than one law at a time. I don't mind the distilling end of it. I can argue that in court and defend myself and my pursuit of happiness and my home and stuff. But when you start mailing it, it's different. But come to festival, and I'll always have a little bit of this with me and try it, man, because it's really really good. And my root beer's not too bad. It's not too shabby either. But hopefully by then I'll have some aged um, multigrain that'll knock your socks off too. Most people haven't seen my multigrain yet. I've been doing a lot of wine making and brandy making the last few years, and been focused on that primarily because I like drinking the wine. I'm getting old and drinking this hard stuff straight. It wears on you a little more. Those hangovers hurt a lot worse when you get old, man. What you go through half a day before you feel right when you're young takes 2 or 3 when you get old, especially after festivals, man. It'd take 2 or 3 days for me to get over it. Yeah, and if you can get some glucoamylase, it'll help. Add some gluco or what we call that some of that seb amylase and sebstar, and here we go, sebflow, viscoseb, sebstar. That'll also help break down some of those and the other grains if you go multigrain. But a good gluco is what a lot of these rum yeast have mixed with it. And so they just mix that amylase in there with it, and that definitely improves your rums, your flavors, and gets, that way you can ferment it all the way out. I will say that having a little bit of sugar when you distill left, instead of it being a dry, isn't always a bad thing. So, you don't have to do that. And if it does have retain some unfermentable sugars, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So not sometimes, when you distill something that's dry, when your mash goes to a dry point, that will affect the flavor of it post distillation, right? So, not all things are best when they're dry. Sometimes it's best to run things when they're zero or just a tad above instead of, below. It's not, and it's not, and it's not unless a lot of the store bought brandies and stuff. They you can take a can of peach syrup and pour into some 180 proof and proof it down, with by math with just liquid and take it down to 100. Man, you can have some of the best peach brandy you've ever tasted. 100 proof, man. That's right off. No, you can tell it, but man, it's awful damn good. It is really good, but it's just, it's not the same. Yep. Come on, you want? Hey, gopher ass is even better, man. Better than molasses. Them little molasses, they really small. Get some in whistle pig butt, man. I'm telling you, man, some of the best and brightest ideas were made from a little intoxication or a little bit of a little devil's lettuce. Deep thought, man. I used to sit and get stoned and just my mind would just drift off and get so far outside the box. I think it's kind of where I came up with my damn bypass back in the day. Yeah, I'm thinking Golden Pearl or something like that. It's definitely a good grade and what you want to get for the money. It's probably one of the better deals. Uh, I think Wes might have found that deal for him and turned him on to those people. But yeah, they've got a place up there in Ohio that has that, and they get really good deals on it. And if you can get it without shipping, it's probably the best deal to get. Every time you go up there and visit them, you need to leave there. It pays to visit him too. Visit Phil Billy, go up there when you do, get some of that heirloom corn because the most of the cost is in the shipping, right? Most people are like, God damn, that's awful lot. But yeah, it costs a lot to ship that shit. You can't eat it and lose money on the deal. So if you can plan a trip and go up there and get you, have a checklist, get you a bunch of molasses in them buckets and let him know in advance so he can get them and prepay so he can go ahead and get them for you and have it all ready and get some good heirloom corn. They got some really good farmers up there. They get that from at a good price and you can get hooked up real well if you don't have to pay for that shipping. Yeah, man, I've been through rabbit holes and yeah, just stay out of those manholes. It's crazy, crazy thinking. Oh, it was white grapes. These were made with actually this particular batch was made with Welch's actually table grapes. It wasn't it's not fancy wine making. These are big ass Welch's table grapes, man. They were huge, and I got a real good deal on them. So I bought a shitload of them and made a big old batch of this. And but it takes so long. The wine itself, it was a mature wine. It wasn't something I just made and then distilled right after it, primary fermentation. I aged this wine for like a year and a few months, and then I distilled it, and then I put it in jars and jar aged it for another 6, 8 months. So it was almost 2 years old when I first brought it out, and that was a year ago. So now it's 3 years, and it's just gotten better. Oh man, it's so good. But the flavor, I think, had to do with the yeast as well. I used the Red Star Premier Rouge or Premier Blanc. I'm sorry, and it's a fruity, very fruity, sweet, floral. Oh man, it's so good. Ooh, it's some heat. 130 proof. And I did 130 because it gets any lower than that. And I used a deflagmator on it. So I compressed a lot of tails and oils into that for aging. Yes, it is. It's Santa season. Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing. Like I said earlier at the beginning of the show. So we're going to tentatively probably call off. Oh, man, that was hot going down there around me. Kind of inhaled that. I inhaled it. What Clinton said I didn't inhale. But Tuesday the 23rd is going to be tentative. Let's probably just say no. We're not going to be here on Tuesday the 23rd. It's family time, and I may be in another state giving away toys to kids and stuff dressed as Santa. So, man, that damn sure. Ooh, that was hot. Damn, that's strong. Woo, 130 proof, man. It's got the sweet heat. That's what I call the white wine it was made from. And used to love it. It's a white wine I make with white grapes, and same process, same. Well, actually, this same process, different grape though, and called Sweet Heat, and it's got a pretty high ABV as far as the wine goes, and it's like not quite a mixed drink, but it gets you tipsy quick. Yeah, I guess the 23rd we'll probably tentatively call that off. So spend that time with family, and it's the day before Christmas. It will be on the 27th. Yeah, that molasses is good, man. Happy holidays to you too, brother. It's good to see you back, bro. Got quite a few people back tonight. It's good to see people come back. I guess that cold weather kind of forces us inside, and gets us off the farm and out of work, and spend a little more time at home when it gets cold. I guess I know I do a lot less when it gets cold like this. Yeah, I like mine too, man. Definitely. I make my own cuts. But I do. I do have a softness for old Weller. Yeah. Old Yeller likes the Weller. Yeah, I like that Weller. It's pretty good stuff. And I like some good bourbons. I'll still buy good bourbon every once in a while, take a sippy sip of some good aged bourbon. I've just never been able to age 13 years, it's hard for me to replicate that shit. I don't have that kind of patience. I got quite a few knots on my head, man. I was one of those kids who rammed their heads in the wall when I was a kid. It's like, I don't know. There's some psychological disorder they called it. I don't know what the hell it was, but I was one of those crazy ass kids. That's why I like playing football so damn much. I didn't grow out of it. Eventually, I grew out of it. I think the last time I ran my head in the wall was when in the old house had a brick behind the drywall, and I ran my head through it and hit that. I think it was drywall right over damn brick. I might have furring strips, I guess, and boom, man, it's like, whoa. that was the last trim. The last time I did that. I remember that too, man. To this day, that's something you don't forget. Yeah, I was like 5 years old, crazy. I was a crazy kid. Yeah, if you're doing banana, you gotta give it plenty of room for caps. Now, those banana caps get pretty huge. Yeah, if it's in 4.5 gallons, you better have an 8 gallon container at least, man. I'm telling you, because it's fucking crazy. First time I did bananas, like, wow. And nobody had told me either. And that's when you get shit squirting out of your airlocks, hitting your ceilings and shit. That's a good test to see if you got a good old lady or not, man. Come home and have banana on your ceiling all around. Yeah, you can see if you got a keeper or not real quick. Yeah. So you got the ADHD as well? So what happens when a lot of people with ADHD, they can't turn their mind off. I don't get good sleep because of that, man. It's hard for me to sleep because I'm always thinking about shit. And that's not necessarily a good thing either, thinking it and all you think, oh, well, the more you think, the better, until you can't, stop. That's not good. Yeah, and marijuana used to be a good go-to for me to help that, and I self-medicated with that for decades. But you get older, it affects you differently, and I just gotta find something else. And Xanax ain't it. Shots, listen, Lisa, trying to kill me. Boy, that last one hit the spot, man. I inhaled it. It went around down the wrong way. But I will take another sippy sip. So you got to come to a festival and try this, man. I'll have this jar and you'll get a sip. That try to walk away with it. I have to tackle you. Gets a little bit easier to drink though once you have a few. That's for you, Lisa. That sweetness though is so unique and floral. Yummy. Very yummy. That aftertaste is so fucking good. Man, it's good. Actually, a pressure cooker is what I first did my first runs on. Was my first still was a pressure cooker, an old pressure cooker back in the 70s. Yeah, we took the little spinner out and put in a copper fitting and ran it into a small copper tubing, and that was my first deal. I've got a banana rum I did. When you do it, mine had a very interesting, it's not a bad drink, but it was definitely different. It had a grunge to it, and it wasn't a bad grunge. It was just a good dark grungy flavor. But alone, it started off and finished the same way, and I didn't get a lot of there wasn't a lot of depth to it. So it's okay alone, but it's just just wasn't all that. So I started thinking, everybody talking about the peanut butter and so I thought, well, this might be good coupled with the peanut butter. And I got some of that powdered peanut butter, and I was going to mix it. And somebody said, "Oh, you got to watch out for that powdered peanut." I was going to infuse it, run it back again through and infuse it with powdered peanut butter. They said, "Oh, it'll get bitter, man. You got to watch out. You can't use too much. You got to be careful." And I didn't want to ruin a decent brand, decent, rum. So I got the idea. I'll rerun it and I'll make some root beer out of it. And I did, and man, that grunge mixed with root beer, that is so good. It gives that root beer a dark, grungy finish, man. And it starts out root beer and finishes. Get that grunge in the middle and finish with that root beer flavor, man. And 100 proof, knock your socks off, man. It's so good. It's a great combination. So when you have distillates like that, I've heard some people say, well, this came off and it was just kind of bitter, it's just real bitter tasting, it's just, like, okay, so make some limoncello out of it, make lemons, make something bitter into lemonade, right? Make some limoncello out of it, and just kind of go with that and complement it with something else, right? So sometimes that's what you got to do. Yeah, it's shipping's crazy, especially way out there. The further away you go, it keeps going up. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's using a pressure cooker. That's my first deal. Try using the pressure cooker under a grate with fire. Yeah, that's the challenges I had as a kid. And I scorched the shit out of the first half dozen runs, but we still drank it. I don't know if we ever got all the scorch out of the bottom of it. Hell yeah, man. That's what I'm fixing to do. I've got two 15s and a 5, and I got some of these stainless ones I'm going to put some other stuff in. But I'm going to fill one of them with a multigrain and the other one with a brandy. I've got some different mixed brandies that were kind of like the peach, that just okay, but just real peachy. And I'm not going to fool with that banana rum or the grappa. But I've got some other brandies in there that, just kind of meh, not great, not the worst, but it's an okay drink. And I think I'll just run them all together, infuse a flavor into it, and put that in a barrel and see what I get. Absolutely, a lot of money and time. Absolutely. Now those mouse asses aren't bad. Better than a rat's ass, because I couldn't give a rat's ass. Yeah, funny. I'm telling you, man. You put a sealed bucket with this little teeny fucking hole in it. It blew that airlock out. I'm lucky that's all that happened, and it wasn't too bad. But if it'd blown the top off, man, it gone everywhere, and I'd probably have been in trouble. I think I inhaled some of that, man. I can feel it in my lungs. Oh God. Yep. Thank God for marijuana and liquor. I self-medicated for many, many moons with that. But yeah, I had ADHD, no doubt. I didn't realize it until I got old, and started realizing, looking at some of the symptoms, and it's like, man, I'm classic ADHD, and I guess just never realized it. Figured everybody was the same way, right? Oh, oh, that's funny. You go watch that for a hint of fire, man. It is. It's good. Yeah, banana makes a good rum. Where you been, Mash Brothers? I don't remember you making any comments up till now. I don't even just kind of lurking and poking your head in there late, thinking like you've been here all along, man. You notice how you did that, Clint? Or am I wrong? Maybe I just hadn't noticed. Yeah, he's either been lurking or just poked his head in and act like he was. I don't know. You be the judge. I tell you what, if y'all haven't tried that Nick Calo's peanut, now if you like peanut butter, it's not a bad off the shelf jar. I got some of it. I thought it was pretty good. And Nick's a pretty good fella too. He's a good guy. He's worked his ass off promoting and doing what he's done. He definitely worked his ass off to get what he's doing and where he's at with the Elvis shot and all the other stuff, man. He's a perfect example of what I talk about when I talk about marketing and getting out there and pushing a product. You know, anybody can make a shine. Anybody can make a decent shine. You know, trial and error, and eventually you'll figure it out and you'll make some decent stuff. But you can make some of the best shine ever and not market it and go broke. And you can make some okay, good stuff and market the shit out of it and make millions. And he's worked his ass off, but he's on the path, man. That peanut butter shine he's got that's on the shelf, it's not bad if y'all haven't tried it. If you like peanut butter, it's actually out of all the different ones off the shelf I drank, it's probably easily in the top five. I like peanut butter. I like peanuts, man. I eat these shelled peanuts all day and night, man. I'll go through pounds of them. I'm like a big elephant, man. I love the fuck out of peanuts. I'm gonna eat them till they say I can't. I get diverticulitis or something. That might stop me, huh? Yeah, it is. It's a sweet grunge. I love it, and it works so well with that root beer. I mean, it's just the combination of it is so good. That's right. I'm a little bit behind, brother. You figured it out. That's funny. There's more deep thought, man. I'm just gonna scroll down just so I can see in the future. I'm living in the past on here, man. What's going on, Brian? Good to see you, brother. Brian might know some of these. Somebody's on here earlier asking about Kansas Sounders. I think we got some from Kansas. I don't know. Can't do maple bacon. Yeah, man. What's up, Slacks? Good to see you, brother. Slacks Mo. God almighty, man. I drank some. I'm still live. I'm still alive. I don't know about live. At least it says live. I'm still live. Yeah, you did slide it. It's a Saturday night though, so we'll let you slide. We understand. Better than Clint's no show a few weeks ago. with no heads up or nothing. He just doesn't show. Well, I'm glad I got y'all, man. Tonight earlier when I first started this, I wasn't feeling good at all. Now I'm feeling pretty good. Hanging out with y'all, and talking and shooting the shit and helping some of the beginners and having some laughs has definitely made me feel some better for sure. Appreciate y'all. Slacks is in the hizzle. That's right. Mimosas make a pretty good, actually, I wouldn't mind steeping some mimosa in that. I don't know. I hate to mess up a grappa, but I'd like to steep some mimosa into a neutral. I know they make a pretty good wine, just a mimosa, but I'd like to steep it into a neutral just to kind of. I think that actually that peach brandy that has a sweetness to it, but just not a lot of peach. I think with a mimosa steep, that would probably be pretty damn good. I might have to try that because I got mimosa next door and I got one started in my yard. So definitely gonna have to put some in blooms in there to see what happens. Yeah, y'all come to these festivals, man. We all got to meet up at the festivals. That's every year, man. There's like 4 or 5 festivals that are don't miss. I go down to Arkansas, Clinton, Arkansas, and visit them down there. Awesome people. Get people from Missouri and Kansas and all over Louisiana coming in there. And go to Maggie every year to that festival. It's a big one. And then Farm to Bottle up in Ohio. Those are the 3 main ones. I'd like to get to the OBX one out on the Outer Banks and do that. I think it's later in the actually probably I don't know. It's late in the year. Uh, Probably already happened by now, but kind of late in the year they have one out there toward the end of the season, and then they have a winter jam like in February. But that's just basically hanging out the bar at Maggie. I ain't gonna drive all the way for that. But yeah, those 3 right there are my primary ones, and then we got one here in Kentucky, Beattyville. Some great people run that, and it helps the local economy a lot, and good people there. So those are my 4 biggies: Beattyville and Maggie and Farm to Bottle and Clinton. But got to try to make one of those and meet up with everybody and hang out, camp. Most of them we just camp at, except for Beattyville. It's close enough for I can drive. But hell, Maggie, we'll either camp or get a hotel. Hell, I'm not even beyond car camping. And with rooms at 200 a night, I'll sleep in the damn car seat like a big baby in my car seat. That's funny. That's right. There's some of the worst liquor out there that sells the shit out of it. Makes the millions, and it's some of the worst shit you can put in your lip. And you can have some nectar of the gods, and if you don't market it, you ain't doing nothing. It won't sell. Yeah, he is. He's all right, ain't he? He's a good old feller. I don't care what people say about him. Definitely got me to the festival though, for sure. Yeah, it's something. Find something close, local. I know those guys out there on the West Coast, like old Mark Fugelfield. He flew out, went to Maggie with us this year. It's great to see him. And there's some good discount rates on flying. So if you can get close to an airport, there's somebody in the family in the Moonshine community that's going to be close coming to those festivals that we can make arrangements and get you there. So, I mean, I'm talking, like Allegiant, some of these others, Frontier, and some of these other airlines, round trip, $150 everywhere in the U.S., $60 round trip. But yeah, On off a mallard duck, turn it into turkey dumplings. Yeah, I mean that's what you do. Sometimes, man, you just gotta compliment what you got, and go with it, man, and improve on it. Yeah, pretty interesting. I don't know about all that, man. I know, man. You got to be like hillbilly, move over here. Hell, he moved from Vegas to Tennessee. Man, his pace of life just went from fast to molasses. That's a good change of life, man. Change that speed, that pace of life, man. It's that slow pace when you start getting a little bit older. It's awful nice, man. And the cost of living is a lot cheaper. Yeah, man. Yeah. And that's what Mark and Lisa talk about too, is a lot of tinctures and plants and holistic medicine and stuff. Y'all, I got to catch their show before this one on Tuesday night. You know, they start a little early, and got to watch those, man. I try to jump on there and hang with them for a while before this one starts up. And both great people and knowledgeable. They had a little quiz tonight. I guess I won. I forgot to check the damn message. He told me, sent me a message. He's in bed now. He's gonna work early, but I guess I won contest. They did little quizzes about the effects of different plants and different herbs and spices. Yeah, I knew something about that at one point in time. Oh no, you didn't just put Evan Williams with Jack Daniels, did you? That Evan Williams ain't all bad, man. That Heaven Hill, I like that Heaven Hill stuff. It's pretty good. That Bottled Bond, it's not bad. For me, if you're going to spend, I think it's one of the best cheap liquors you can get. It's not the best, but I think it's one of the better cheap liquors you can get. It's that Evan Williams Bottled Bond or that Heaven Hill Bottled Bond. But if everybody had the same opinion, it'd just be 2 or 3 jars on the shelf. And Jack Daniels, I agree. That's right. It's value. It's like that Kessler and some of those other ones. They never said they're the best. They ever bragged to me. I like that Evan Williams bottom bond. That's pretty good for the money. I bought it. I used to get it by the quart. You know, just for the money. It's cheap, and for the money, it's pretty good for what you pay. Again, cost to benefit and flavor ratio is pretty right for that Evan Williams. I thought the bib, the bottom bond. I appreciate it, brother. I like to have those lurkers now. You know, I know there's a lot of lurkers out there. We've got a lot of people that watch, especially on YouTube, and a lot of people. Oh, I didn't have it. A lot of people just listen in. So, and that's fine. But I appreciate you jumping in and letting us know. And thanks for being here. And if you got any questions, don't be afraid to ask. Only dumb questions is the ones you don't ask. So. Yeah, man. There's been a lot. I tell you what used to get me though, the worst hangovers was if y'all ever drink any of that Boone's Farm and some of the what was some of those other ones, Mad Dog 2020 and Boone's Farm and some of those things, man. Those wine hangovers are some of the worst. And if you ever drinking Applejack, those are some bad hangovers too. That freeze distilled liquor, those make for some bad hangovers too. Yeah, that Mad Dog and that Boone's Farm, those were some boomers, man. Yeah, early times used to be what we got the bootleggers most of the time. But early times in Kessler. I grew up on early times. I didn't like the Kessler that well. Awesome. What'd you get? I'm hoping it was a football. I'm hoping that is that your primer? I'm hoping that you listened a few weeks back and got you one of them footballs. If not, we'll get you Ripple. Yeah, that what's that Rumple Mints? Yeah. Night Train. Yep. Oh yeah, and the turkey's good stuff. TJ Swan, that's bringing back some memories. Yeah. Kind of Thunderbird, T Bird, Tickle Pink. Man, them women loved that shit, didn't they? And I drank it because they loved it. I'd buy it, and suffer through it, but it's better than beer. I never was a big beer drinker. Wild Irish Rose. Schnapps, yeah, Rumplemints and schnapps. That underproof schnapps. Yeah, boy. Been to jail a few times on that. Yeah, well, it's my favorite because it's what all the girls liked, and you just have to get what they liked. Yeah, Night Train, man, T Bird, yep, fruit beer schnapps. I always drink that Rumplemint schnapps, man. That 100 proof schnapps, shit. Now, I had a bunch of friends drink that Goldschlager. I've had a few shots of it, but I was always weary of, I never seen that shit in my piss or in my shit, so it's hanging around somewhere in my body, and I didn't think it was probably gonna be pretty good. So I don't want that shit hanging on my liver or anywhere else in my body. And I'm like, I ain't pissed that out. I ain't seen no gold flake shit either. So gotta be somewhere, you know. I know my stomach acid ain't breaking it down, so I don't know. I just didn't like the thought of it. I drank up a few times, but I left that to them. But I did go through a big stage of Jägermeister. Yeah, I drank a lot of Jaeger back in the day. That was some bad hangovers too. Well, that's fine. 8 gallon boiler and 2 inch. But yeah, bring your questions, brother. We'll get you up to snuff and we'll get you going. But yeah, you're modular though. So you got the 2 inch tri clamp. So at least you're on a modular. So that's as good as the football. I mean, they've got them in 8, 13, 15, 18 gallons. So I mean, as long as you're modular, that's the most important thing. The we knocked a lot of the Vevers and a lot of the beginner pots because they didn't have a large enough diameter copper line coming off of them. They had bad gaskets. They had way undersized, condensers. Just horrible. Just horrible. did some crazy shit. I don't know if I ever did that. Yeah, we did some wild stuff. Well, that we did. I added molasses with my banana. Actually, brown sugar and molasses with my banana. Yeah, you definitely good with the 2-inch modular for sure. That's fine. Yeah, that peppermint schnapps, peppermints. Yeah, I did that with gin. I got real drunk on gin, and I remember throwing up and it coming through my nose and burning worse than it did going down, and all that juniper in my nose, and I went a long time without drinking gin after that. Yeah, that's perfectly fine, and neutral is not a bad thing for beginners either. But you definitely want to and having 2-inch into a shotgun condenser or whatever, that's not necessarily going to give you a lot of reflux. So you know you'll be all right. But yeah, we'll get you in to make some good corn liquor and running it straight through. Yeah, it's getting about that time. Old dad's getting tired. I haven't been sleeping good. I had migraines earlier this week. My stomach run bothering me. Haven't been sleeping good. I had odd hours. Today I slept between, I guess, 9 or 10 in the morning to 3 or 4. 9 to 3 about. Well, good. I couldn't sleep at all last night. I think a lot too, JJ. I get thinking, don't feel good, and my mind gets going. I can't sleep. Well, with the brown sugar, you're getting two things. You're getting the molasses. I use the dark brown sugar, so you're getting the molasses and the sugar to boost the gravity a little bit. The bananas wasn't enough alone. It's kind of like a strawberry, just not enough alone. So I kind of boosted it with the brown sugar, and it gives it a kind of a banana rum. It's basically banana rum. It's good shit. I love it. Definitely better than watermelon. Yeah, the watermelon one didn't work out well. Damn, I inhaled that. Maybe another drink to make it feel better. Cheers. It's about that quitting time, boys. Definitely easier when you drink it properly. I think I drank and healed that. I think I got some of my lungs. I mean, it'll clear my lungs up. We'll definitely have you doing it, brother. Slow Jim Fizz. Oh man. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not real flat. I'm not real fond of the watermelon either. That's so far it's the worst other than corn scorched corn, which is absolute worst. It's most people just pour it out. I was young and stupid and it had alcohol in there. I'm drinking it kind of thing. But yeah, watermelon, my wine wasn't good but I'm gonna try to lower temperature, give it a second shot. It was definitely warm when I did it. It's August temperatures, definitely warm. It was a mash that was in the upper 80s, mid to upper 80s. So I think cooler might be a little bit more conducive, especially for something like a watermelon. I can and use a little different yeast. I think I'll utilize a little different yeast with it than what I used. I think I used the old Datey with it, and that didn't work well. Probably should. I don't know if I used that or EC 1118. One of the two was, and I probably should have gone with the Premier Rouge, and it probably had a little better flavor. Yeah, that's what I did with my grappa. I aged it, made a good white wine out of it, and it was aged like a year and 3 months before I distilled it, and aged it for another, 8, 10 months in a jar. And it's a little over 2 years old when I brought it out. Now it's actually three, close to 3.5 now, and it's damn good. It's really good. 71B is great yeast. Allow them. They make some good stuff. All right, y'all. It's getting about that time. I'm getting tired. You can tell by looking at me. I start looking stone when I get tired. And I think last week, man, I was like all squinty eyed. I was like, man, wasn't feeling good. This is when I had migraines, and I take a pain med, so it takes the pain away, but it's still there, and I can't handle a lot of light and sounds and noises and stuff. So, and but I just had my stomach hadn't been feeling good, and a little bit of a couple shots and y'all, it definitely made me feel better. That's for sure. Yeah, cider, the 71B and the 74, both are good ciders. That 74 is a lot of people like that 74 for ciders and for meads primarily. Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, I guess we'll see you Tuesday, not Wednesday, not a hump day anymore, but Tuesday we'll see you. Everybody have a great rest of your weekend, and bring your friends and tell your friends about it. Let's get more people in the hobby, and more beginners coming in here, and we can help teach them, the ropes, and hang out and drink a little while and talk shit and see what's going on in the world. We're not talking too much about politics. We'll try to keep it light, and got too much of that shit everywhere else. So we try to just have fun in here and keep it kind of neutral like our liquor. But y'all have a great weekend. What's rest left of it, and we will see you back here Tuesday night at 8 Eastern. Until then, y'all have a great weekend. Shine on. Love y'all. Peace out. See you Tuesday.